Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of NCIS Reports in the Field. Today, I have this distinct honor of interviewing somebody that I've known for a long time, but is truly one of the best agents that ever walked the grounds of NCIS. I have a quick story before I turn it over to Pete. Pete Hughes is who is with us today. In 2007, I was a new supervisory special agent, and I went to the supervisory special agent course. Pete was an instructor and had come down from headquarters and was an instructor in that course. And he unfortunately got the dubious honor of teaching um, case review, which, as everyone knows, is this new supervisors despise case review. But I have to tell you, Pete, that was one of the most impacting classes that I had that week because it taught me the importance of case review. At that point, I was like, I always hated case review and I had to go and sit with my supervisor and talk about a case. But you made it sound like it was the best thing in the world, and you sold it, man. Kudos to you for that, because I got to tell you, man, I walked out there going, I was a true believer then, man. I had been saved by grace, and I am now going to be teaching case review like nobody's business. So I want to thank you for that, because I started my supervisory career in the right way. So listen, it's great to have you today, Pete. Pete's got a great history with the organization. You know, a lot of people talk about the U.S. Marshals having Wyatt Earp and, Elliot Ness being Department of Treasury. But, for NCIS, we got Pete Hughes. And I got to tell you, he's probably better than those two guys. So, Pete, welcome to the show, man. Good to see you.
Thanks, Lee. It's great seeing you, and it's an honor to be here. And sorry you had to go through that case review course, but I'm still a believer in it. But absolutely, thanks. I appreciate it. Look forward to this interview. So
yeah, man, it's great to have you. You had such a distinctive career.
And kudos to you for putting this program together. I think it's awesome. Good for you. Good,
well,
good,
thank you.
good
I
on
appreciate
you.
It.
You bet.
I'm hopeful I can get a lot of people, because the reason why, as I told you on the phone, the reason why I started NCIS Reports on the Field was to give everyone a voice that wanted to have, something they could give their family. This is really for your family. It's for Karen, who put up with you all those years while you were in the organization, and your kids who have now grown up to be great Americans, as somebody once said. But listen, I really appreciate you coming on the show, because it really does. A lot of the people that listen to the show are new agents, and they ask me all the time about when I was an annuitant. What did you guys do when you were doing this? And I'd have to explain, well, these great agents, we had this and we had that. One of those things, obviously, was the cold case, and we'll talk a little bit about that today. But I look forward to having Jim Grievous and you on here and to talk about that as in depth. But let's talk about yourself. Now, you're from originally from Charlotte, North Carolina.
Well, I was born I'm a Air Force brat, so I was born in France.
Okay.
And did a lot of moving around, and to include living in West Point for a couple of years when my dad taught there. But actually taught Coach K.
Is that right?
Who was in political science.
Holy Moses.
You bet. When Bobby Knight was head coach of Army. That's how far back we go. Yeah.
Wow.
But and then lived in a number of states, but then really settled down when my parents split in Alexandria, Virginia. So went to high school in Alexandria, and then went on to college. I graduated from Virginia Commonwealth University back in 1981.
Wow.
For those of you, that's a long time ago. For those of you
that was just a city college back in those days. Now it's a major university.
Exactly. So and I did a criminal justice degree. Always knew I wanted to get law enforcement, and and I didn't want to police. I wanted to be a police. Well, I wanted to be an FBI agent, actually.
Okay.
And I tried to get on board with the FBI. They said you need experience. So decided, okay, let me get on with the police department. I didn't want to go back to Alexandria and be a police officer there. And this is the truth. And I didn't want to be a police officer in Richmond, because I didn't want people coming to me and go, hey, I got this speeding ticket, or I got this other charge against me. Can you reach out to Officer Smuckatelli and see about having it reduced or dropped or what? I just wanted to go someplace where nobody knew me and
Yeah.
then start fresh. So hence, I had a brother living in Charlotte, North Carolina, so we moved down there, joined on with the Charlotte Police Department. Now it's called Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Department, but
Okay.
that was a phenomenal. Hired on in 1982, worked 4 great years with the police department, worked the inner city, the hood, and so really learned a lot about myself. I tell you, and I attribute that, and I think I've seen a lot of great agents who turned out that they had been street officers before. You've got to be quick on your feet. You've got to wear a different face on any different call. So it's no different. It's really about leveraging people. You go into a violent domestic violence situation. Sometimes you got to go in there with be tough, or other times you see it, you get an opportunity to get them laughing and hugging and kissing as you're walking out the door, and they appreciate you coming doing these kind of things. But I really learned about people, and I learned about myself. And so 4 great years, and I've got a hint, that we had each other's back, that, when you work in those areas and you got an officer, a buddy screaming for help, I mean, there's no stopping you, and you're going to go. And so we are all very tight. We get together once a year. I mean, you're talking since 1986. Yeah. Great group. And, but it was time to go. I wanted to be a federal agent, and I still wanted to be an FBI agent. And Mike Battle, I think you remember Mike Battle. He was a Charlotte police officer at the time, and he had hired with this agency called the Naval Investigative Service. I'd never heard of it. I didn't know it was never heard of it. Naval Investigative Service. What is it? What do they do? And he was in the hiring process, and he explained it to me. And I thought, well, what the heck? Let me throw my name in the hat, and because my goal, let me hire on with them, and I'll jump over to the FBI if I'm fortunate enough to get picked up. And I ended up, going through the 2 interview process, and they offered me a job. In the meantime, I had met my wife, and we were engaged, and we had just recently got engaged, and we were due to get married in the middle of October. And the job offer comes in, and I have to report to FLEPSI 2 weeks before I get married, which means I'm at FLEPSI. I'm going to get married at FLEPSI. What? And I'd already paid for my honeymoon and all this. And
how did Karen respond to that?
Well, you know what? It was amazing. She was behind me. She's,
that's wow. That's great.
She knew that this was a big change, and she needed to make the sacrifice. But it went from Cancun to
St. Simon's Island.
Yeah, it was. Well, it was the Holiday Inn on St. Simon's Island. And so the amazing thing is, I tried to get my money back. I only got 50% back, and and when I contacted headquarters, they said, "Hey, can you push me back to the next class? I'm getting married." And they go, "No, you're just running to the luck. If we reach out to you, we reach out to you. We just don't know." So anyway, I went ahead and make the plunge and hired on with them. And so there I was 2 weeks into FLEPSI, and flying home and getting married, and flying back on a Sunday night. I'm getting in at midnight, and I had my first legal exam Monday morning. Can you believe that? Geez. I'm up till 3 a.m. studying. I'm supposed to be on a honeymoon, right? So anyway, the rest is history.
Good stuff, man.
Yeah, the rest is history. And my first duty station was Mayport.
Oh, wow.
Which was a great first duty station. My first back then they called them SACs in the old days.
Yep.
It'd be the equivalent of an SSA or a RAC now. I'm not sure how big Mayport is, but Dave Brandt was my first boss.
How was that? I mean, because this guy's going to be the director someday. I mean, what was he like as a supervisory special?
I'll tell you, I've worked many jobs in my life and many assignments in my life, and I've never worked for a better boss ever. I mean, and just a slight note, he was there from 86 to 89 when I was there. And then he transferred out, going to the Philippines. And I remember telling my wife, Karen, I remember saying, you know what, that guy's, and I'm only 3 years on with the agency, and my world was just Maple. I didn't know, but I knew leadership. Okay.
Yeah.
And I told her, I go, one day that guy's going to be the director of this agency. I mean,
Yeah.
he was a leader. We had a couple stressful cases, and he took the pressure off of us, and he brought humor into
Yeah.
the building. And he would talk to a GS7 just like he would an admiral,
Yeah.
with respect, and with humor and respect. We used to have, back in those days, we'd have cooperating witnesses come into the building. Who cared, But
Yeah.
he'd muck it up with the CWs, and
Is that right?
he was so grounded and so sharp. He had he had great vision, and
Right. He's something.
we had some tough cases. One of them that we worked was the Reuben Cologne case. We had a
Okay.
dispersant officer killed that was murdered on the USS John Hancock pierside,
Yes. Yes.
and I think it was 87 or 88, and murdered. And he was shot in the head, and he was stuffed into a locker, and sea bag locker space,
Hmm.
and nobody heard the gunshot. Nobody, they were looking for him, and
Wow.
find out that where is he? And then they find him stuffed dead in the locker. And we thought, and I was pulled off of drug surveillance at that time. I was waiting to cut a deal, a drug deal, and we got the call. Everybody back to the office, 911. We got a murder on the ship, and I just remember we're all piling up, and Mark Fox. Everybody remembers Mark, one of the best investigators NCIS ever had. Great guy, and is focused and as hard worker as I've ever seen anybody. And I thought, we'll have this thing solved in 24 hours. We'll have this wrapped up. You just don't get away with a murder on a ship pierside, buddy. I'm telling you, we didn't have that. It took us. It was 3 or 4 weeks, and we were running out of leads. Now we had a beat on a couple guys that just, we felt that they might be good for it, whatever. But we got a big break because there were 2,000 U.S. Treasury checks that were stolen out of the safe, and $100,000 cash. And but we had notified all the banks in Jacksonville that if somebody comes in, wants to open up a weird account, a box or whatever, if you think he's squirreling his active duty, then contact us. It was 3 weeks later.
Right.
And it was because we were putting pressure on this guy. And we felt like he was Reuben Cologne. He was a chief in the Navy, E7 in the Navy at the time. And the bottom line is, we got a tip from the teller. She called, and I remember it was a Friday afternoon. We're all sitting there in the conference room. Brant's there, and the call came in, and because we're just at wit's end, we're just kind of running out. Now we had a beat on him, but we weren't sure it was him. But and because he wanted to open up an account, he was going to come in the next morning and open up and move money. He wanted to do it in the box, and wanted to know if the government would be informed about it. So he did pretty good until he opened his mouth and asked that stupid question. So it makes us all look like we're freaking brilliant investigators.
Yeah, exactly.
And
now
so,
let me ask you this, Pete, about that case, because Mark Fox came up in '89 when I was in basic school, and he briefed us on that case, which was just a fascinating case. You guys used surveillance aircraft. That must have been the first time we used surveillance aircraft in an investigation.
Yeah, we use FBI. Yeah.
Wow. So how was that arranged? Because I know how FBI could be kind of difficult to work with sometimes.
It's Brant. It's all Brant. Brant had everything wired. That was what he was so phenomenal. We decided, we were working a lot of drug cases right outside the gates. And, he had a great relationship with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. They had, 1,200, deputies, whatever. Sure. It's huge. And here we're this little office of 15 agents or whatever. Yeah. He got us all arrest authority under the sheriff.
Wow. It's hard to believe the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office would do that, but okay. But
You're exactly right. Yep. So there, I made numerous arrests after we do a buy bust and arrest him, and we take him down to the jail and process.
Fantastic, man. That's awesome.
It was the wild, wild west, but that was Brant. bottom line, back with the FBI and the air support. That was Brant. He had such a great relationship with the SAC of the FBI, and so he had it wired. We had that plane up in the air, and thank God we did, because he did. Bad guy Ruben Colon did a number of. He went to 3 different banks on his way to the final bank where the teller was working at, who notified us that, hey, this guy's acting squirrely, asking questions about and wanting to open up account, the next morning. But he'd gone to, we had like 6 vehicles, surveillance vehicles, and the FBI agent up in the, flying, the spotter was saying, back off, this guy's doing counter surveillance, major counter surveillance. You're going to get burned. Just back off. I got this. And we watched him. And I mean, we watched him. And after he left each bank, then, a couple agents would go in there and go, hey, what happened? What happened? Well, he went to the safe deposit box and withdrew, whatever was in there. It was cash. He had it in 3 different banks. And then he wants to move it all into this final bank. And so we had cars at that final bank that, he was going to open up the account with. After each bank he departed, the agents ran in there, radioed to the team what's going on. And so we were getting the justification for PC for, a search warrant eventually. And then he went into the bank and made and put the money in we didn't know at the time. I mean, he was carrying a big satchel. I mean, he's kind of bent over as he's walking because it was so heavy with the $200,000 in cash. And $100,000 in cash. And then, he went in the bank, and when he came out, we snatched him up, and then we got the PC for the warrant. And I think there was there were $93,000 in the safe deposit box, and all 2,000 checks that were USS John Hancock checks. But Brant, we were under a lot of pressure, and Brant just kept the freaking pressure off of us, and brought humor in there. That was just him. But it was grueling, and Mark Fox did just a phenomenal job of being the case agent. He'd stay up at night because he would want the written interview reports, before we left. So, we'd leave at 7:00 at night, here's my 5 interview, and then he'd read them all and then decide what needed to be done. He'd have homework assignments for everybody the next morning.
Really?
Here are your assignments. Oh yeah. I don't think he slept.
Wow.
I don't think he slept. He was he was just a machine.
Yeah.
But yeah, great work. That was a great office. I did, your first office, you get the crap cases, you get the toolbox cases, you get these.
Sure.
And back then we worked the 8G cases.
Mm-hmm.
You remember that? Okay.
Oh yeah. Good time.
And I figured this is BS. I think I'm going to go back to the police department. I was thinking about, I kept my certification for 1 year, and I was thinking, and I thought, why can't I do what Mark Fox is doing? Mark's working dope cases out in town and all that. And I go, he's not getting any of these duty calls. They'd be going, Dave Brandt and Jim Black. Jim Black was the assistant SSA or whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. He'd be coming down. Where's that new agent? Where's that new agent, Pete Hughes? I got a duty call, and it would just suck. And I thought, how can I get out of this? I go, I'm going to do what Mark Fox is doing. I ended up getting me a bunch of, cooperating witnesses, good one. Even had a permanent Navy guy, active duty Navy guy assigned to me. And then we planned him wherever we wanted to pay him. And then he would tell us where the dope is and who's selling it. And so
that's awesome.
That way, if I'm filling the evidence locker with dope, and he's not neither Jim Black or Dave Brandt's going to be coming down the hallway asking for Pete Hughes to get work this toolbox case or whatever. So.
Hey, I got this bicycle that got stolen. Can you take it?
Exactly. But they had great guys there. It was Mark Barstow was phenomenal. Brian Vaught was with us.
Brian Vaught. Wow, I haven't heard that name in a while.
Yeah, Wayne Mixon. I mean, we had a lot of just great camaraderie, just great teamwork and all that. We worked hard, we played hard as well. But no, we had a great cruise. So that was from 86 to 89. And then I jumped over to the USS Saratoga.
Yeah. So you decided to go on the Saratoga. Were there any apprehensions taking a float position? Because I mean, that's going to be a lot of work because you're going to go on, were you on an agent at the time when they had two agents or one, just yourself?
It was one, but I had it wired right. I was taking the Saratoga out of the yards. Okay. Out of Newport News. They'd gone through an 18-month overhaul, right? And so for the first year, and the afloat assignment's 1 year, right?
Right.
So I thought, oh, I got this thing licked. I'm not going deployed. I'm still fairly newly married and all this stuff. I'm still reeling from the no Cancun honeymoon. So anyway, I thought, I told my wife, I go, hey, I'll be going out a few weeks at a time, that kind of thing, but I'm not going to be gone for 6 months. No, I'll be off the ship before they do a major deployment. But I'll tell you what, Lee, I can tell you this about the carrier assignments and stuff. I believe you did a carrier assignment.
Right.
And when I was a street agent at Mayport, and I'd see the at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on Fridays, the cars were all lined up, heading out. Everybody's getting off at 1 o'clock on Friday. And I'm like going, I missed my calling in life. I should have been active duty Navy, man. They got this shit. Man. They got it easy, not knowing that when they're deployed, they're putting in 12, 18 hours a day, particularly the guys, the engineers, keeping that ship running. Oh my gosh, that was the best move I ever did, was jumping over the carrier. I had so much respect for those guys when they're out there deployed and keeping that war machine operating at peak level. But
let me ask you this: so you guys, I mean, so now you've been on the ship for about a year, and all of a sudden it's time for you to rotate out. And did the officers, did the staff come to you? Hey, Pete, man, we'd love to have you for a little bit longer, because you do get those relationships.
That's exactly what happened.
Like going, we really like you. We don't want anybody else.
Well, that was back in the day when it was fairly new. I mean, went to the first afloat school.
Oh wow!
And so we had a couple people out of my afloat school class who got thrown off their ships.
Me too. I mean, we had a couple of guys in my afloat, because I remember that was one of the classes that they had in my afloat school program, was getting kicked off the ship. Now, not to. And we still had guys kicked off the ship.
Yeah, we had two out of my class got thrown off. One was not fair. The other one was he deserved to get thrown off the ship. But anyway, it was and you say, hey, as my year was ending and I got to know the crew so well and the officers, they were telling me, they're going, hey, Pete, you need to sign up for another year. And I'm like, what? You go, yeah. And this is all the truth. They go on. I have one guy who goes, I've done 7 med cruises, Pete, in my career. He goes, I've looked at the tentative schedule right now, and it is the best schedule. We're chopping in the Palma, Spain. That's where the ladies are on the beach, and they're topless out there, Pete. And I'm like, what? And he goes, hey, we're doing all these different port visits, and we're doing Christmas in Marseille, France.
Yeah.
Your wife's part of the officers' wives club, and you can have her flown out with the other officers' wives, and you need to come on, man. This is you've done all these workups with us. This is where you enjoy it, and
yeah.
And I go, okay. And so I talked Karen into it. I go, hey, you can come out with the officers' wives of Christmas, and in the meantime, and she finally says, she goes, okay,
yeah,
you're there. And then next thing you know, she's pregnant with my first son, right?
Oh, wow.
So I'm chopping out. Well, there's so many stories going on at the same time. I'm leaving her. She's pregnant. The officers are going, boy, you have picked things up real quick. It took me my third child to figure out I need to get her pregnant, and I'll be gone for 6 months, so I don't have to experience the wrath and the hell of my pregnant wife. You did it the first time around.
Oh my gosh! Oh my God!
Anyway, so there, and it turns out that my wife worked at a restaurant there in Jacksonville in which they had to change a command where the old uh, carrier commander was departing, and so they were having the incoming, and so they were having his hail and farewell right there.
Yeah. Right.
Hail him, bringing him in, and farewell to the outgoing. And the Joe Mobley, Captain Joe Mobley, was the commanding officer of the carrier coming in. He was coming in, and his wife was the one who worked with Karen, who was the catering manager at this restaurant. So she did all the events and stuff. Well, they hit it off so well. They ended up being best friends. And as a matter of fact, the CO's wife was the Lamaze partner while I was out there.
That's awesome.
So
that's awesome.
So I got it wired with the CO, right? I can't do anything wrong.
That's great, man. That is great.
And I had a seasoned guy who had an agent who had told me, Pete, the couple people you need to get up with and make sure you lock good relationships: the supply officer, the legal officer, security officer, and you better have a good relationship with your XO. Well, I listened very closely, and I was like, next thing you know, I got my own stateroom, right? So I didn't have to bunk with anybody; had it all by myself. So anyway, now we're ready, and we're getting ready to do a 6-month deployment. I got the green light from the wife; she's happy, although pregnant, and about 5 days before we were to deploy, Saddam Hussein went into Kuwait.
Oh my gosh!
And there were no ships in the Red Sea. No carriers in the Red Sea. So we got on that ship, and the skipper said, command officer said, we're going to get over there in record time. And we transited the Atlantic in record time. No carrier had ever gotten out there because we needed to get down the Suez Canal and into the Red Sea, because at the time they thought he was lining up to invade Saudi Arabia.
Sure.
And so we needed our Air Force down there. And so anyway, so we're chopping over there record time. I'm going, I'm waving goodbye to Palma, Spain. Someone goes, well, Palma's right over there, Pete. And I go, that's as close as I'm getting. And do remember, we were on the carrier, right? Yeah. And so, my first year I'm on the carrier, they go through all those exercises, training. Okay. We're under attack, missiles inbound, brace for shock. Sure. Check for watertight and man your stations, don the mask, right? Well, you know what that meant for me, Lee? Nap time.
Rack time.
Oh my gosh, yeah. It was lights went out in my office. I was able to lay back. I had this big countertop. I just had pillows there. I just lay up there and nobody ever bothered me. And they say, don the mask. And I go, I don't even know where my fucking mask is. So anyway, now I fast forward, and now we're racing over there, record time, and the commanding officer gets on the 1MC and he goes, listen, this is serious stuff, guys. Everything we've been training for, you've heard the intelligence, the stories that the Iraqis got the chemical weapons. They get the third largest military in the world. This may be a real one, guys. So all that training we've been doing and all that, it's going to come to use. And all I could think of was, where is that mask? Not one time did I go in and I pulled that thing out. I tried putting it on upside down.
Oh my gosh!
So anyway, yeah, we went over there, and of course, everything was, we got over there in August.
So Pete, your caseload while you're on the carrier, I don't know if it was like mine. It was pretty heavy when I got on there. It kind of cleaned itself out because we got involved with Somalia at the time. But it seemed to me that when there wasn't anything going on, you had a lot of trouble. But as soon as these guys get locked into, this war type mentality, things just it becomes boring for you.
Oh, you're exactly right. That's exactly what happened. The year I was on the carrier, the first year I was on the carrier, we had ATM machines put on there for the first time. And boy, I tell you what, people would loaning their PIN numbers out and having their buddies get my money out. I've got the watch or whatever. Next thing you know, their accounts were all being drained. There was all kinds of problems when we did play the war games down in the Caribbean on the 6 week war games, it was well, bottom line, that first year there was all kinds of crime. I mean, I had a plate full, a caseload
Sure.
high all the time, and then we went into St. Thomas for R&R after at the tail end of the playing the war games, and the sailors did some crazy things there. But I'm telling you, when we strapped up on everything and it raced across the Atlantic in there, it was no crime. There was no crime for the next several months. Zero. Everybody was focused. Everybody knew, they're part of history. However, this was going to play out, and they weren't thinking about stealing or anything like or doing anything ridiculous. It was everybody was focused. It was amazing.
Yeah.
So
It's amazing how that happens when they start doing their job, and like you said, these guys are working tremendous hours every day. I mean, when you see an 18-year-old out there on the flight deck for, what is it?
Right.
Ship where they're doing 6 hours and then 2 hours sleep, then 6 more hours and crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Well, probably the biggest event that occurred while I was out there was we had, for Christmas, the war started on January the 17th of 1991.
Yeah.
And so we're in Christmas, and it was decided, hey, let's shoot up the Suez Canal, and then let's go into Israel. And we'll. I'm drawing a blank at the port for right now. At Haifa, thank you.
Yeah.
So we were going to do Christmas in Haifa, and so you'd have to moor out there about a quarter mile away from the pier side because it wasn't deep enough. And so we had, the ship had rented these skiffs, these little ferry boats to take the guys on liberty and back and forth. And so we were there for, I think, 2 or 3 days there. And then one night, my admin point calls me, says, Pete, we got a problem. Look out the window. And I was staying at the hotel, and it was lit up like the 4th of July. I mean, it was helos up in the air. The whole place, Haifa Bay, was lit up. And what had happened was we lost a ferry boat sank. It flipped and sank, and we lost 21 sailors on that ferry boat.
I remember this.
Yeah.
Wow.
They drowned. We had, I think it was 85 to 90 on there. I forget, but we lost 21. They were in these heavy coats because it was cold, the dead of winter, and all that. Never had a chance. So I'm going to tell you this: the Israeli Defense Forces, they know how to respond. I mean, we probably would have lost double that at least had they not been able to respond the way they do. If that had happened anywhere in the U.S., we would have lost a lot more, particularly if we'd gone to another country in that same thing. But they're so used to crisis and responding to crisis. I give them great credit for saving so many more lives. But
wow,
you get up, as Lee, if you were an agent, you're going to go, what can I do to help? What can I do to help? And I get down there, and the skipper, whatever, and I go, hey, let me go over there where we rented the ferry boat from, and so went over there and chatted with the owner, and he made a critical mistake when he said, hey, we didn't empty the bilge, and that's. So it was sitting low, and it was normal chop. But man, once water went over the one side, it lifted, another wave came over, and then it sunk within 20 seconds. Wow. So it was kind of nice because I didn't know. I think all I know is I got a wonderful kudos from the admiral of the battle group, saying that I was able to move so quickly and get that key information. Because I think essentially, the government, our government, our military, whatever, we were not at fault at anything. It was truly the vendor and the boat and all that. But it was classic. It was so unfortunate. I knew 6 out of the 21. I'd been on the ship so long.
Wow.
I knew 6 out of the 21. It was sad, but yeah, that was. And then the war started, and on the 17th of January, and I remember going out there. We did the first bombing raid around at 3 o'clock in the morning, and then And then the second one's going to be going out pretty soon, but they allowed us onto the carrier. I mean, onto the flight deck. And I went out there and I signed several bombs, and said, hey, this is
That's
from
cool.
Brad, because my oldest son's still, and my wife's carrying him in her belly. But hey, Saddam, hope this lands in your lap, and took pictures of it. And kids laugh at it today, but
That's awesome.
And so it was a couple of weeks we were on there during the war, and then I had to fly back early. And this was one thing I forgot to mention in my Mayport tour, but I had to fly back for a double homicide trial.
Wow.
That in 1987, and I hadn't even been on a year yet, not even close to a year yet, maybe 9 months, and we had you may remember this, 1987, in May of 87, we had the USS Stark was hit by 2 Iraqi missiles.
Yes.
And we lost 37 sailors on that ship. This is when we were patrolling the waters.
Oil tankers going in and out.
And Iran and Iraq were pretty much at war at the time, and Iraq thought we were, a bad, whatever. But anyway, we took two missiles and we lost 37 sailors. The ship was limped over to Bahrain. It was a Mayport-based ship, the USS Stark, and it limped into Bahrain. They did some repairs, and then it returned to Mayport in August. And actually, in the meantime, President Reagan had come down as part of honoring the 37 lost sailors. That was powerful. But when the ship came back in August, it's got Jackson was a big Navy town, because you had 3 bases at the time there. And they, if you were a USS Hancock, a USS Stark sailor, and you had your ball cap on, you had all the free food, free beer in town, whatever the case may be. But there was this sailor, Walter Thomas Taylor. He was an E3 on the ship, and he came back, and he lived on the ship, so he didn't have an apartment to go to. And he saw a buddy who had been assigned to the ship, who was pier side. He was out of the Navy now, and he saw him. He said, "Hey, why don't you stay with me and my wife, and don't stay on the ship, and for the long weekend and all that." So he said, "Fine." Well, they went to this guy's former sailor's apartment in Jacksonville, and they did partying for a couple nights in a row. And he introduced the former sailor introduced Walter Thomas Taylor to a young lady who had 2 kids, a 3-year-old and 6-month-old, and Taylor kind of mentioned how she was attractive, and the former sailor goes, "No, she's married and her husband's on the USS Saratoga deployed. Don't be messing around with that stuff, whatever." Well, it was 2 nights later. I think it was like whatever. The two guys, Taylor and his former sailor buddy, went out and got tanked up, and they come back to the apartment, and all we know is, we got a dead 23-year-old woman, and a 3-year-old had been murdered, and she had been hogtied, sexually assaulted, and the 6-month-old was left in the crib. And so, the sheriff's office, because the murders, the double homicides out in town, they're knocking around. They end up knocking on, the former sailor's door, and they said, "Hey, do you know victim, the 23-year-old?" He goes, "Yeah." And he says, "Hey, my buddy, who's no longer here, was really acting strange. I mean, he was interested in her." He goes, "But we'd gone out and pounded the beers, and he came in, we came in, and he slept on the couch, and I woke up the next morning. It was like 8 o'clock in the morning, and he's not there, and I can't figure it out." And next thing you know, he comes through the sliding glass door, and he's saying, "Hey, I want to, screw the Navy. I want to get out the Navy. I want to get a 1-plane ticket to Salem, Virginia, to go back home. I'm done with the Navy." So he shares that with the sheriff's office, which, okay, he's all of a sudden, he's a suspect. Yeah. And so they put me and Mark Fox on a plane, and we flew in the Roanoke, and it said, need to follow him, do some surveillance, whatever. So we had the addresses for his mom and all that. We're up there surveilling on her house, and it's, I don't know, I think it's like 6 in the morning. It's just starting getting break, and daybreak or whatever, and we're listening to the radio. And let me back up just a little bit. Walter Thomas Taylor was featured on the local news there as a hero, because he helped put out the fires, and they lost 37 sailors. So, we're listening to the local radio station, and we're surveilling the mom's house, hoping to see him come in or out, and we're going to snatch him up and next thing you know, on the radio, they're going, and our local hometown sailor is a suspect in a double homicide. And I go, well, you know, cat's out of the bag. You know, if
Yeah.
the radio station knows, then he knows, you know. So we spent, it seemed like we were just like 3 hours behind him for about 2 or 3 days straight. I mean, we had people, you know, snitching on him. Hey, he was just here, whatever. We ended up finding him, and we snatched him up, and Mark Fox had found him in the woods, and I was interrogating the guy's sister, you know, because someone had tipped us off saying, hey, he's here now at the apartment complex. He's talking to his sister. And we got there about 30 minutes later, and I'm you know, I'm giving the sister hell, you know. And Mark is walking around the woods, you know, and he stumbles upon Walter Thomas Taylor, puts a gun to his head, and, you know, and then cuffs him, and then we're working with the Salem Police Department there, and with a detective. And so, you know, we go, you know, I'm a GS7, right? And Mark's like a GS39, and Mark goes, hey, Pete, you know, I'm just going to do what I'm told. He goes, hey, I need you to do this interview by yourself. I go, okay.
Okay.
Okay, I guess, you know. I'm thinking, what, you know, whatever. So anyway, get him to his rights, and, you know, double homicide. You know, I guess it was about 6 hours with him, and I was getting him, I was turning him. I knew I was getting through, and then the floodgates opened up, and he tells me how he did the murder, the double homicide. He used a hammer. I was sad, particularly with the 3-year-old. I mean, she had perfect hammer circles on her head, the top of her head, and told us where he hid the hammer, and the sheriff's office didn't have it, and it was still in the apartment. So when I was let Mark Fox know, you know, during the break, and he's calling down there, and they're going down there, and they're getting the hammer, and boy, it's a good news story. Yeah, he confesses it's sad. And
Hey, Pete, so let me ask you this. As far as, so you're a GS7 and you're going into this double homicide suspect, and you're going to be done. Did you guys discuss on your way up there or during that time, okay, if we get this guy, this is going to be the strategy to when we talk to him? Or did you just use your skills that you'd acquired while you're with the Charlotte police and your first 3 years there with NIS?
Well, we just both naturally assumed, you know, we snatch him up, do the interrogation. Mark's the experienced one. He's got the lead, you know, and if I could chip in, whatever the case may be. That was the, you know, plan. Well, that obviously changed, and that's because he put the gun in his head, and he didn't want that to become an issue later. That, of course, he's going to confess, you know, something he didn't do, or, you know, it didn't happen the way he said it did. He just wanted to get out of that interrogation room because, you know, Fox had put the gun to his head, you know.
Yeah.
So anyway, he, you know, confessed. It was, you know, kudos to the Mayport field office, and you know, and working with the sheriff's office, whatever. But the thing is that, you know, he pled not guilty, and then he was determined incompetent to stand trial. Well, so anyway, so that was in 1987. Now you fast forward to 1991, we're at war with who? Iraq, right?
Yeah, sure.
So all of a sudden I get this message from the office saying that Florida State Attorney's Office needs you back immediately for the double homicide trial, and because he's been determined competent to stand trial. Well, of course. Well, because right, who bombed us? Who bombed the ship? Iraq, right? 4 years later, who are we at war with? Iraq. And all of a sudden, he's saying, explaining what happened was that he thought that the female victim, the mom, was a terrorist. You know, he'd gone to her place, and all of a sudden, he said he tried to kiss her, and next thing you know, he's envisioning her, she's this terrorist attacking him, or whatever the case may be. Well, that's the reason why that was his only chance, was to say that she was a terrorist. I thought, how convenient. And anyway,
did she have any Arabic background or anything in her life?
No,
she's probably named McAllister or something.
Yeah,
Scottish Irish name.
Last name was Smits, Smits. It was unfortunate because she was, she only had one hand. You know, she was crippled, and so I mean, she didn't have a chance against this guy. And
Good grief.
so anyway, we get him convicted of first degree, both counts, and we had one juror who did not want to see the death penalty, so he was sentenced to life, consecutive life terms. And I say that because that was 1991, right? We get him convicted, and then it was like 4 years after that, the trial is the conviction's overturned for prosecutorial misconduct, and here I am going back in.
What?
8 years
Really?
later, testifying again. It was during the OJ trial too, when
gosh.
the police and tampering with evidence, and they were very concerned about, the prosecutors were very concerned about, because we were suffering a black eye at the time, but we got him convicted again, double.
That is crazy.
Yeah, wow. No kidding. But
so,
anyway, I forgot all about it, except for when I started thinking. Well, then I flew back, during the deployment in the war.
What was that like? Did you have to go up to the captain and say, "Hey, Captain, I got to can you get me on a C2 and fly me off here and get me back to America?"
Well, I had a good working relationship with him. I mean, because my wife and his wife were best friends. So I had it pretty much greased. I had the good relationships with the senior officers and all, and all. Yeah, they had no problem getting me. Of course. Plus, here I am on the USS Saratoga, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm going back to trial to a guy a sailor who's on trial for murdering the wife and daughter of a Saratoga crew member who was deployed at the time of the murder, right? Yeah. So he's happy to, hey, anything I can do to Pete to help you get back to Florida and put this bad guy away. So anyway,
good stuff. So you are how many years were you in Mayport before you where'd you go? You went to Charleston after that, right?
I went to that godforsaken place, Charleston, South Carolina.
Hey, all of us would go, who did he kill to get that job? That's one of those jobs like going, all right, I'm in Charleston, South Carolina, and I know how to get into this city, whether it's by bus or train or airplane, and I got all those places covered, and I've got my guns.
Yeah, I was blessed. But back in my day, because the float program was fairly new.
Yeah.
It was you get your first or second choice where you want to go, and my wife had said let's do Charleston because it was close to Charlotte and all that, and plus, I mean, who doesn't want to go to Charleston, right? So
yeah, absolutely, it's beautiful.
Anyway, transferred there, and I was earmarked to go to the main base. Back then, you had Charleston Naval Station. It was probably the fourth largest Navy base in the country. You had San Diego, you had Norfolk, and you had Pearl Harbor. So those were the three biggest ones. And then you had
Charleston was that big. It was that big, huh?
Oh yeah, it was big. But what ended up happening when BRAC was coming around, it was like, okay, we're cutting back. And Naval Station Charleston got whacked because it couldn't take carriers. It didn't have deep water. So we had lots of ships and lots of subs, but we couldn't take carriers. So it was a good call to close that. But yeah, I was supposed to go to Naval Station Charleston, and we had a NISRU, was the Naval Weapons Station. So I'm supposed to be coming into the big base, and I'd work I had a reputation for being a drug guy, right? So I'm going to come in, I'm going to, work drugs with the drug team and all that. And the next thing I know, I'm being diverted in the Naval Weapons Station and with Grievous, Jim Grievous.
This is the first time you guys have met, or?
Actually,
know each other before?
We met at Spats training.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's where we met. We hit it off. We were roommates in Spats training. That was what was it, 2 weeks of training or 3 weeks or whatever for doing details, and but we really hit it off when we were roommates during that time frame. So anyway, I didn't know until much later he was the main reason why I was diverted from the naval base over to the little weapons station, which was a 2-man office. So it was just Jim and I. And I'm frustrated because I wanted to work drug cases, and then I learned that probably 80% of what we do is child abuse and child sex abuse cases.
Oh man!
And I'm like going, what? I've done a couple of these, and I didn't much care for them, back in Mayport.
Right.
And next thing you know, and Jim was the absolute best. I mean, that guy was just an incredible agent all around, and a talent in and of itself. And he was a master at these things. I mean, I watched him work, bad guys who were child molesters and getting them to confess. And I'm going, wow, that was amazing the way he walked that guy through and backed him into a corner. Next thing you know, he's fessing up. And I quickly learned, because now in the meantime, I got my own son, right? I mean, he's born, Brad, and once I learned, I'm going, you think about it, you got drug suspects and you got child abuse suspects, child sex abuse. Who really is the worst one out? Please, this is real simple. You got these young kids that can't say, don't know how to say no, and they're told, if you say anything to anybody, you're going to get hurt, or your mom and dad's going to get hurt, or whatever the case may be. And I mean, they truly are victims they're victimized for life.
Yeah.
And so I took a real knack into that. I jumped on that once I really realized how valuable it was that we solved these things. And so worked a bunch of child sex abuse cases.
So Pete, let me ask you this, as far as those new agents out there, watch the show. When you go in to an interrogation with a child, with a potential pedophile or child a sexual assault suspect, what's the thought process? What are you thinking about, and how are you going to get that guy through that interrogation when you're sitting down with him?
Well, I think he went through the Reed School of interrogation. I went through it. I was a pretty good interrogator. I always thought I was. I always, I got more confessions than I didn't, and I never knew until I went to the Reed School, and my eyes opened up. I go, that's why I was doing some of the Reed techniques. I didn't know that's what I was doing, and then when they walked me through it, and then boy, I grasped on that. I mean, the key is to give them an out. Listen, and we're all taught at birth, what? Tell the truth. At a young age, we're always told, tell the truth and you'll be okay.
Yeah.
Tell the truth and it will be the best thing that's going to happen to you is if you tell the truth. Well, that's instilled in us since birth. I mean, 98% of us. And so, Jim used that all the time. I use that all the time with these people, and just going, hey, you can't, with these child molesters, I mean, they're the worst, but looking to give them an out. And that's, they want an out. They want to confess. Whether you're a rapist or you're a housebreaker or whatever, once you're in that interrogation room, they know what, particularly if they've done it, they know they've done it. Yeah. They really don't know how much you have, and they're trying to figure out. Their mind is racing. It's mind warfare. I mean, it is. And so, I learned, in all these interrogations, I learned that the most valuable resource on the planet was those service record books. Because you go to the service record book and their life is in that service record book. You go to their, the SF-86 or whatever, but there's, all their previous employment, where they lived at, who their family members are, all that's in there. And I would review that stuff, and Jim would review it, and I'd go, you go in that interview room, and you put them at ease, you put them at ease because you're setting them up. And when you're, we would do things like we would pick up bad guy. We'd be driving. It didn't matter what the crime was. It could be a child molester. It could be a housebreaker. It could be, a property crime, or it could be a drug crime. And you're driving them to the office, and you're talking to them. And what you're doing is you're throwing information out there. You go, hey, I know you were raised in this town, and you went to this high school and whatever. And what you're doing is you're setting them up, because they know what they're being hauled in for. And what you're doing is you're letting them know how much you know about them. And so now you're in the interview room, you end up saying, hey, there's not anything I don't know about you. I can tell you what side of the bed you sleep on at night. So when they know, if you've got that much information, then they know that that they're good for. And so you're throwing that stuff out there, and at the same time, you're just going, hey, this is the best thing you can do is just fess up to it. And, and I'll speak, I'll let the prosecutor know, or whatever the case may be, but you know how that goes. But you're disarming them mentally. That's what you got to do. And and you've got to let them know that so much about them.
Yeah. And how important is rapport with the suspect when you go into
it's everything.
Yeah.
It's everything.
Yeah.
You've got to have, they've got to like you, because like I say, they want to confess. They
Mhm.
want to confess, but they don't want to they don't want to go to prison. They want to confess and they don't want to be held accountable, but they want to confess. Why? Because, like I mentioned, we're taught at an early age, tell the truth, and it'll be okay.
Yeah.
And so it's that rapport. And if they like you or they respect you, they're going to be more inclined to eventually roll over and tell you the truth. It is
Yeah.
all
Sure.
about rapport. If you
Yeah.
go in there gruff and you go in there, hey, you're threatening them and all that, you're
Yeah. Like they do on
nothing's going to
TV.
happen. It's going to be a short interview.
Yeah.
And it really is, they teach you how to interview and interrogate. It drives me crazy when I see some of these, you know, you know, cold case shows or whatever, and you see that table there, and the table's between the investigator and the bad
Yeah.
guy, and you're going, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, because as you're moving in when you're getting close and you get a sense that this person's ready to confess, you want to roll your chair up and tap them on the knee and say it's okay. And but if you've got a desk or a table between you, what?
Well, I remember seeing an interview with Dave Early and Thomas Emos, and it was as soon as Dave puts his hand on your shoulder, you're done.
Right, right.
That's
That's it. I mean,
yeah.
it's everything's mental. And if they, unless they, and it, they've got to respect you and like you, and that's a different one. And we'll talk about that one, maybe in one of the cold case episode or
Yeah, that
whatever.
sounds
But
good. That sounds
it
good.
is, everything is rapport. And he's got, if he senses that so much about
Mhm.
him, then he's going to be more inclined to confess. If he establishes a rapport and he likes you, he's going to want to confess. Give him a reason to confess. Give him an out. Hey, it was an accident. Whatever it was an accident. You didn't mean to do this. You didn't mean to do that. Whatever. Or it's only happened once. But
Mhm.
it's happened multiple times. But whatever. Just get them over that hump, and that when they just finally say, "I did it."
Yeah.
But
Well,
yeah,
that's interesting. I mean, because that's one of the things that I see new agents. I think they're and kind of what they're being taught today. And not that I'm against any of that stuff. If it works, it's great. But if it doesn't work, if you have lack evidence and you can't, it really comes down to preparing yourself for the interrogation by getting, like you say, getting to know that person, getting to know everything you know about them before you go in that interrogation room. Because if you just go in there cold and go, okay, you read their rights, and then you start trying to get them to confess, it just isn't going to work. You're not going to build
right,
that rapport.
right. Well, if you're cutting up with them and on the ride, first of all, I would never, you know, I quickly got away from calling the commanding officer of the XO and saying, "Hey, can you have Smuckatelli, brought over to the office?" No, I got away from that, because then he knows what he's being called up for. He knows
Yeah.
he may be being escorted by the master chief or whatever the case may be, or the lead, the division officer or whatever. But he knows what's coming. No, I
Yeah.
don't want that. I go to the ship, or I go to the duty station. I brief the senior officer or whatever, and then I have them delivered to me, and then I drive him or her back to the office. In the
That's
meantime,
interesting. Because I mean that technique I think is a really brilliant technique, because I mean, yeah, I used to do that same thing. Hey, CO, can you call over so and so? But after about 3 cases of them coming over and going, boy, that just didn't go well,
right,
because it's like the guy was prepared by a chief or prepared by a gunny sergeant. Somebody got to him. I even had one lieutenant one time on the Kitty Hawk call me and says, "I told him not to talk to you because of what happened at Tailhook." And I'm like, "You got to be kidding me!" And it's like you need to be kicked out of the Navy. And so that that's always a challenge. But you're right. Some of the
that is
best interrogations I ever had was when we picked them up the ship and had that conversation with them, going back to the office to kind of get to know them, but also letting them know that we know a lot about them.
well, that and you're establishing that rapport that you mentioned a few minutes ago. Is it valuable to have that rapport? Because if you have the rapport on the drive, and that person's already warming up to you, because you're talking about, hey, I know you went to this high school. I know that area is great fishing, bass fishing, or whatever the case may be. They're warming up to you, so they know now why they're going over there. But they're going, this guy's okay.
Mhm.
And because now you want to get them through the rights waiver. That's the key. as you
Yeah.
know, and so they're more apt to sign off, initial everything, sign off, and say, "Yeah, I'm willing to talk to you," because they halfway like you,
Yeah.
because and so and that's an art in and of itself, as you know, is to get
Well,
them
let's
to the
talk about
right.
some of the people you work with at Charleston. So you worked, who was your supervisor in Charleston?
Well, I had Leonard Loring
Nice.
was, and then I had um, Clay Jones was
Okay.
my, I guess, my ASAC, and I had
Yeah.
Joe Brandt was the big
Okay.
boss back then. He was a great. So I had uh, good leadership, and it was just Jim
Yeah.
and I, out there at the weapons station. We made our own calls. We were very, very independent. So I loved the independence, and
Mhm.
just continue to grow as an agent. And
Yeah.
it was kind of funny because Jimmy and I, you know, I was known to cut corners. I cut corners all the time. I love policy as long as, policy can be, as long as
It's
I don't,
flexible.
as long as
It's
I don't
flexible.
break the law. Yeah, the policy can be a little bit flexible, right? But,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then Jimmy was by the book. That's probably surprising to you, but he was just anal about going by the book. And I'm
Really?
going, and I'd be going, Jimmy, I'm bullshit. I'm not doing that. He goes, "You're not going to do that," whatever it was. And I go,
Oh,
"No."
that's good.
And then he'd be going, and I'm saving time. I got time to do this. You got bad guys out there, doing bad
Yeah.
things. I can't be doing this BS administrative stuff. And so,
Just get to the case, man.
so as he would say, that, Pete, I taught you how to work child sex abuse cases, and he did
Mhm.
phenomenal. And then I taught him to cut corners.
Well, you
So
guys
that was,
obviously worked some really good cases there in Charleston, because that's where you started your time working cold cases, right? And,
yeah,
so you picked up on this.
we had, I look forward to it because you'll get a kick out of Jimmy and I doing the cold case stuff together,
Yeah.
on the podcast. But he had a case. It was the Palan case. It was Annie Tahan was missing. She'd been
Yeah.
missing for a few years.
Sure.
Just walked off the face of the earth. She was a civilian, but she lived with a Navy chief off base. And to make a long story short, because we'll get into it, in the future podcast, but we all knew that this Navy chief was good for her disappearance, and she, was probably dead somewhere. And Jim is as thorough an agent as I've ever known anyone. I mean, there are things I wouldn't have done, and I'll do 99% of everything, but
Yeah.
he wasn't afraid to turn over a stone, because it was like, I don't know what's under that rock unless I flip it over. Even if there's the chances that there's nothing under there, it's okay. I flipped it over and I know that there's nothing there. But he was at wit's end. I mean, he had worked this thing for like 2 years, whatever, and he throws his arms up and he goes, the bad guy had already lawyered up. He was in Hawaii at the time. He was in E7, and Jim and I were so close. I mean, I knew everything about that case. He'd be briefing me, what do you think? And then I'd run a bunch of leads with him too, so I knew the case inside and out. He goes, "I'm just going to close it out," because we were supporting the local sheriff's office. So we were just providing the support, but we were essentially driving the case, because so many Navy members had left the area, and so they needed to be interviewed different parts of whatever country and all. And I just remember him just saying, "Well, I'm just going to close this out because we've done everything way beyond for the sheriff's office. We've met our obligations." And I go, "That's okay. You go ahead. I'm going to assume it. I'm going to take it and run with it."
Yeah.
and,
Wow.
and as he later says, he goes, "Well, I mean, his thing was, no, 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 Pete Hughes, you're not taking this case. There might be a chance you're going to solve it. So I'm going to solve it, kind of thing." And then we got a big break or two, and we'll share that later on. But next thing you know, was at the time it was the biggest case in the agency, and it was a big, and Kathy was key on that thing. Your wife was helped us, because this guy had murdered a couple people,
Yeah.
and but it was elevated the biggest case, and at the same time we're heading up the cold case program for the first time. So this was was a big feather in the cap for everybody when we finally figured it out and put the pieces together.
Well, I look forward to us talking about that case, but I do have one question about that case, and I heard this. I don't know if this is true or not, but I understand that he was convicted, sentenced to life, and he is now walking the streets of of South Carolina
Yeah.
somewhere.
What ended up happening, and it's very interesting. We were working with a young prosecutor, Chris Reismeyer, out of Mayport. That was where we charged him. He was eventually, we got building up evidence against him. We got him charged with capital murder.
Yeah.
And we were going with capital murder, and we got wind from the young Lieutenant Commander Chris Reismeyer, who is a dear friend of mine. He retired as an admiral with the Navy. He was the deputy JAG, and we're still. I was just on the phone with him a couple nights ago, talking about something. But love that guy, man. He was a fighter, and
because we were trying to get the death penalty on this case, right?
Yeah, capital murder. We were going death penalty, and then what we got word to us, to Jim and I, that the admiral's lawyer was, who made the ultimate call whether we're going to go capital murder or not, was getting skittish, cold feet, because the threat that was going to play the race card, because it was the victim was white and he was black, and so the defense attorney kind of threw some things out there. They were going to play the race card, and they wanted to stay away from that. And we got wind of it, and so you remember Jerry Nance, great guy.
Yeah, sure.
May he rest in peace.
Yeah.
But he was the head of the crim program back at headquarters, and he was tracking this case closely. He flew down there to Mayport, met us, and we met with the admiral and the admiral's attorney and the young lieutenant commander. He didn't care. I mean, he was polished, knew his stuff. Basically told the admiral's lawyer, who was an 06 Navy captain, said, "Sir, no disrespect." He goes, "But this is if this qualifies for capital murder, it needs to be capital murder, and I stand behind that. And Commander, you need to go with it." Ultimately, it did not, but he was so polished, he was so good. When most lieutenant commanders would just roll over when the Navy JAG, the 06, the admiral's lawyer is pushing a position, most people are going to just roll with it rather than put their careers at risk, kind of thing. But that what ended up happening. We ended up tightening up that case so tight that he ended up pleading guilty to first-degree murder. He was got a good deal out of it. He was sentenced to 30 years, did 18, and was eligible for parole at 18, and was walking the streets after 18 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Any idea what that guy's doing today?
No, I just that was a crazy case, and Kathy knows that case very well. It had some twists and turns that most people don't even know. It would be it'd be a 2-hour, Dateline story, to pull that off with the twists and turns that are never out there. But that wasn't part of what we ended up getting him convicted of. But it was crazy. That guy was scary. Yeah. Very, very scary. And it was premeditated for months.
Well, I think one of the things that I remember, I think it was this case, was being briefed on the evidence collection within the blood within the grate in the TV, the speaker. Is this the same case?
Yeah, it is.
That's incredible.
When we talk about know your subject, know your bad guy, when we knew everything about him, and his ex-wife had told us, we said, what did he do with the furniture? And I was told he sold all the furniture.
Mm-hmm.
What was, and no, it was told that he gave it away. And she said that's absolutely not, because she had shared that after the murder, the ex-wife had come up and helped clean up the apartment.
Froze up a little bit.
Yeah. We went after the ex-wife. She was married to him at the time that he killed the victim. And she ended up coming up to the apartment after the murder, and the body was still in the apartment. She helped clean it up, paint walls, clean the carpets. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I hear you fine now.
Yeah. And
got some issues with my internet on this side, so it's not you.
So he had chastised her because he had left the apartment to go get some more cleaning supplies, and he said, "Okay, clean the TV." And he came back, and he goes, look at there's still blood on the TV, you dumbass, and you didn't clean it good enough. So she goes over and cleans it up some more. So we want to know where that TV is because that was in close proximity to the body, so when he's murdering and casting blood off. And so we found the TV, and we tracked down everybody in the apartment complex and asking them, do you remember this couple? And everybody remembered the couple because they were a mixed couple. And, and one guy goes, yeah, I bought, one guy said, I bought some furniture. Another guy said, I bought some furniture. And 90% of everybody were Navy people because it was so close to the Navy base. And then I got one guy in Ohio to say, yeah, I bought that TV from him. I go, you got the TV? You still have the TV? And he goes, yeah. And I go, how much will you let that TV go for? He goes, $400. I go, sold.
Wow.
So we had an agent pick up the TV, and we had it shipped off to the FBI, and they pulled the specks of blood out of there. That was
It was on the backside of the speaker, right?
Yeah, that was the
speaker screen.
That was the final nail in the coffin for him on that when
awesome.
He came by. Yeah, and that was 7 years later. 7 years later,
that's crazy.
So tracked down the TV in another state and have it. It was a long shot, but it was worth it.
Oh, it's beautiful work. So you, after you and Jim are working these cold cases, then the program manager job comes open at headquarters, and you put in for that, right? Is that when you put in for it?
Yeah, and then I was selected for it. I took over. Joe Kennedy was the first program manager of the Cold Coast program, and I guess he had been at it. I think it was finishing up 2 years when I moved in. And Kathy was part of the cold case unit up there at headquarters, and came in there, and they Joe had done some phenomenal stuff. I give tribute him. He's one of extremely talented agent, that's for sure. We needed to put some rigor into the program, and we all knew what needed to be done, and we started doing it. And we just had to be patient with it. Some of the low bearing fruit had already been picked, and I remember going through the cases. I'm going, it's going to be a while before we break another one, And so I just needed to let the leadership know, just be patient. We're going to get there. Yeah. We're going to get there, and we eventually did. We went through a cold spell for a while, but as we were building the program and putting some rigor into the, here's what we're going to do, and freeing up money to run particular leads down and all that. But then they started dropping. We were getting some successes, but the key thing behind that was just getting buy-in from the senior leadership, and we had, and that was it. And of course, Director Brandt was the director at the time, so he was behind it. So.
Clearly was behind it. So sometimes. When you look at these cases, they're looking at from the outside in. You're looking at, all the stuff that has to be done in these cases. But sometimes it's a phone call that you got that really kind of kicks in working a case that was probably one of the most famous investigations that was done by your unit and NIS. And that was the Munns case.
Yeah. Andy Munns. Young sailor, had just gone through officer candidate school, 25 years old, joined the Navy in 67 when it was not popular. We were fighting a war with Vietnam. A lot of people were protesting and not, volunteering. He stepped to the plate. After he finished officer candidate school, he went to banking school down in Georgia, learned how to count money because he was going to be a dispersing officer, which is essentially the banker on the ship. Right. And so they flew him out to Subic Bay, and that's where he joined the ship. And it was on it for a few weeks, and then it was finishing up its tour, did a 6-month deployment in support of the war effort out there in the combat zone. They were a refueler of fuel, so they refuel other ships at sea in the combat zone. And so they were finishing up, and they were chopped back into Subic Bay. He'd only been on the ship for 3 weeks. And he was last seen around midnight, and then failed to muster the next morning. And when they failed to muster, he's the banker on the ship. They need to get into the safe. There needs to be, dispersing activities need to be done. He's unaccounted for. They can't find him. He's eventually listed as a unauthorized absence, and then 30 days later, he's listed as a deserter. And they had done an audit on the ship, the bank. I mean the safe. There had been it was $8,600 missing from the safe. That's back in the day where they carried a lot of cash in there. I think they had 100,000 in there, and they would pay the sailors on the mess decks. That's what they paid cash. But it was $8,600 missing, and so he was suspect because he can't be found, and there's money missing. And they do. NIS does an investigation back in the day, and they're not able to solve it. And because it's a theft case, they did a couple polygraphs, they did some interrogations, some interviews, and they end up closing it out, saying, "Hey, when he's picked up for desertion, then we'll reopen the case and interrogate him." And that was it. And that was in 1968, the spring of 68. The case was closed as unresolved theft case. I get a call from his sister in 1998. I've probably been the program manager heading up the cold case squad for maybe a year. Get a call from the sister of Andy Munns, Mary Lou Taylor, and she's telling me that hey, Andy's never been heard or seen from since January the 16th of 1968, and we knew immediately when the Navy contacted us. We knew that something bad had happened. Andy was basically a choir boy. I mean, he was. Yeah. Pretty good athlete and all that, but he he didn't mess around. He was a straight arrow. He was a straight shooter. And then she had attempted to do some of the investigation herself. She had FOIA'd the original NIS investigation. It was all blacked out and all that, but she's trying to track it. And she's saying, "Hey, this really needs to be investigated. I've tried to do what I can. I heard you're heading up the cold case squad." And it turns out to, so anyway, I, talked with her, and I said, let me take a look at this. So I pulled the case file, unredacted. And then, as you know, in a lot of these situations, you got an administrative, a JAG investigations being done parallel. So I was able to get my hands on that too. And then reading it, going through it, Andy's body was never found, never surfaced anywhere. So I'm looking at this and I'm going, he's dead, and he's been dead since January the 18th. There's no doubt in my mind. I go, but damn, I don't have a body. The ship was turned into razor blades in 1973, so I don't have a ship anymore. I got no crime scene. I got nothing to work with other than these, and there were a couple guys on the carrier. I mean, on the ship. It was the USS Cacapon that I didn't like their statements. They were very negative to Andy Munns, young ensign. And I'm thinking, why would you be negative about a guy you don't even know? And that really, there was some indicators like that going, he's, this guy particularly is throwing the investigators off. And he had passed the polygraph, and he was a second-class petty officer on the carrier. I mean, on the Hancock, the Cacapon at the time.
Yeah, sure.
So he was Andy Munns's, Ensign Munns's right-hand man. He was a second-class petty officer. Had a great, service record book, phenomenal ratings. His previous dispersion officer said he's one of the brightest guys on the ship, to include the officers. And I'm looking at him real hard, and I end up meeting with Mary Lou. She flies into town, and I go, "What do you want out of this?" And she goes, "Look, my father just killed my father. He was dead 2 years. I mean, he was writing senators and congressmen and senior leaders down in the Pentagon and the Navy saying my son wouldn't have done this. He had a massive heart attack within 2 years." She goes, "This killed him." She goes, "My mother is passed a few years ago. She always wanted a flag because she knew, she wanted the Navy to give a flag." She goes, I looked into getting a flag for him, to give to my mom, and they said, "Hey, flags are only given to people who leave the Navy honorably. Your brother was a deserter. Sorry, denied." So I just told her, "Look, there's only one reason I'd be willing to open this, and that is to solve it and then hold somebody accountable for it. That's the only reason I'd open this thing." you know what, I get to make the decision, so we're going to open it, and I wouldn't have given that thing to anybody, except maybe Jim Greer, to solve with no solvability factors. The solvability factors just didn't exist, and but we went after it, and I don't know how that deep you want to go into it, but I focused on that second class. Went on that second class. Went after that second class petty officer. There were 3 guys we were looking at. They all gave negative statements about Andy Munz, and they all worked, with the exception of the second class petty officer, the dispersing clerk. His name was Michael LeBrun. With the exception of Michael LeBrun, the other 2 had nothing to do with the dispersing office or even that division, and they were saying bad things because we had reason to believe they hung around Michael LeBrun some. Okay. And one of them had worked on the safe, had changed the combination of the safe recently. And so he was interviewed, and he said negative things about Ensign Munz. It just didn't make any sense at all. So we really focused on those 3 guys, and we pulled everything we could about all of them. And Michael LeBrun, out of the 3, he was Andy Munz's right-hand man. He squeaky clean, no nothing so much as a parking ticket. So anything. Now he'd had 3 failed marriages. I think he was on marriage maybe number 3 or maybe 4. I can't remember. And I thought, okay, he's the most squared away. The other 2 had alcohol problems, major alcohol problems, other crimes, petty crimes, whatever. And I thought, okay, I'm going to go after the squeaky clean guy. And I need to know what was going on in that office. And let me back up a step. I wasn't going to assign this case to anybody else because the solvability factors were so low. And I had such good rapport with Mary Lou Taylor, the sister. I thought, I owe it to her. This needs to be investigated as a homicide and not as a theft. So let's give it a shot, a legitimate shot. And so, after I think about 9 months, I got on a plane, and I contacted Michael LeBrun, who was living in Kansas at the time, and said, hey, I'm doing background investigations. This was kind of crazy. I kind of laugh now, but I had to come up with a reason why I needed to talk to him.
Yeah.
And I didn't want him to know I was going to talk to him about, Andy Munz, because Michael LeBrun has got out of the Navy a year after he got out of the Navy, I think in '69. Okay. And Andy murdered in January, or disappeared in January of '68. So he was in he was in one more year, and then he got out, and then he went to college, and then he did a year law school. That's how smart he is. But he's an underachiever. Failed marriages, selling, module homes now, that kind of thing. So anyway, but squeaky clean as far as crimes and whatever. But I needed a reason to let him know I wanted to come out and chat with him. Told him I was a background investigator for the Navy, and I was doing background investigations on several guys that he, a couple of guys he worked with on the ship 30 years before.
Wow, what was that? What was that like, finding guys 30 years before?
That's laughable.
30 years old. Oh, God.
So, I called him, and he said, yeah, I'll meet with you. I was going to, meet at the local police department. And he agreed to meet me there. And, because I told him I was going up to Ohio and then coming through, doing up backgrounds up there, and then traveling through the middle part of the country, and I'd be in his backyard. So when he comes into the police department, the first thing I say, I just say, look, Michael, I got to be honest with you. I misled you about the purpose of this meeting. I go, I'm really here to talk with you about the disappearance of Andy Munz, the ensign, your dispersing officer, back in January 1968. He looked at me and he goes, I never believed that in the first place. Your explanations about background investigation, background, I didn't believe. He goes, I figured that this was going to be what it was about. And that,
he actually said that. He actually said that to you.
Yeah. So that was,
he knew that was coming.
That was the, hair on the back of my neck. One. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then one of the things when we talk about interrogation strategies, one is you want to know how good their memory is. And so there's a way of testing it without them knowing that you're testing it. And that's what I did with him. I wanted him to tell me his life story about, when he entered the Navy, why the Navy and not anywhere else, and tell me about each duty station. I already knew what duty station he had because I'd gone through his service record book and I'd done all my homework. So I knew as much about him as possible. We don't have, the fingertips of the internet now that you can find out a lot.
Yeah.
Back then it was more, gumshoe detective work back in the day
Go
than
to
it is
go
now.
to. Did you have to go? How did you get a hold of his service record books? You had to go to St. Louis, or where were they?
Yeah,
stored those things?
that's where they archived them at the time. All these old service books. So yeah, we had Susan Lucy, somebody.
Yeah, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, was over there. So yeah, you put the request in and you get the service record book. But so I think I spent 5 hours with him, and I'm having him walk me through why the Navy. He said, "Hey, I wanted to join the Air Force. I went to the Air Force recruiting office. They were closed for lunch." And this is the detail he's telling me. I said, "Oh no,
Wow,
fuck
that's
you, Air
detailed.
Force. The Navy guy's there. I'm going to join the Navy." So he goes in
Yeah.
there, and then he's telling me in great detail about his first 2 duty stations before he comes over to the Cacapon, and just great detail. He had a memory of a steel trap. So he's telling me about their first deployment, on the Cacapon in support of the war, and he's telling me about different things. So I'm going, okay, he is sharp, sharp, sharp steel trap. Now, because he was interviewed twice in the original investigation back in 1968, one by the U.S. agent and one by lieutenant, Jag, who's heading up the Jag investigation. So he was interviewed twice. So I had statements that he had provided in both those. And what he said in those statements was, and particularly with the NIS agent, he said, "Yeah, we were in there counting money. We were doing money things, up until 11 o'clock that night. And Andy had wanted to go on ashore earlier, but he got denied." He goes, so he says, "Hey, let's work, throughout the evening." And so at about 11 o'clock, he says, "Hey, I'm done. I'm calling it a day. I'm going to get up early. I want to get off the ship. I want to buy some items before we pull up anchor and go back out to sea, because they were going out to sea later the next day." And so Michael LeBrun says, "Okay, you have a good evening." And he was gone. And what we do know is that the last time he was seen, he got called up to the deck. Officer of the watch, a message had come in. He needed to do something first thing in the morning on some payroll issues. And so that officer had said, "Hey," he left here about 12:20, about 12:15 or whatever it was. And so he knew he had to do this thing first thing in the morning. And that's when we think he decided, you know what, rather than do it first thing in the morning, I'm going to go back to the office and knock it out now. So what ends up happening? I mean, so what LeBrun says, he left at 11 o'clock at night. Boom, I never see him again. And I come in the next morning, he's not there. Some requests are coming in. I need Ensign Munn as a dispersing officer to make these decisions. He goes, and he's not here. And then now it's like I tell the supply officer who falls, the dispersing officer works for the supply officer, and says, "Hey, he's not here." And then they start looking, searching the ship, and then, the search, expands. And in the meantime, they find out that the safe was, he had found that safe was unlocked. And so he had spun the dial to lock the safe. And then it turns out that nobody has the combination. So they had to blast into the safe. And that's when they did the audit and learned $8,600 is missing. So anyway, that's what he's saying. And he says, "Hey, I knew that Andy was a diver, would dive occasionally." He goes, "I went next door to the ship next door, because that dispersing officer went to banking school in Atlanta with Andy. And I knew he was a diver too. And I went there looking for Andy. And I said, 'Hey, have you seen Andy?' And that dispersing officer says, 'No.'" And catch this. This is what big red flag when he's telling the NIS agent and the JAG officer. He's saying, so I went there and I'm talking to the dispersing officer on the ship next door who knows Andy, and they've dove together. And I say, hey, well, maybe he went diving, you know, in Subic Bay at midnight. Who's going to go? I mean, there's more feces in there than there's fish. That's for sure. So nobody's
true. That's
so
true.
and that officer, he was eventually interviewed by us. He said Andy was a safe diver. He would never go diving in the middle of the night, in Subic Bay. So that was just crazy that he would say, because what he was saying was maybe he went diving and drowned. It's kind of what he's alluding to. So anyway, that was a big red flag, back when the original investigation, and he took a polygraph and he passed. I tried to get my hands on got the results of the polygraph, but I didn't get the charts, and I needed the charts. Al Reese was the program manager at the time, great guy, and an equality guy, and we just, we didn't have the charts, and we desperately needed the charts. So anyway, now fast forwarding, and that's what Michael LeBrun had said. Hey, couldn't find Andy. He was, we needed him on this ship to take care of this stuff. I talked to the dispersing officer next door. I said, maybe he went diving. And then he goes, I come back. We need to get into the safe. It turns out nobody has a combination, so they have to blow open the safe. And so all those people were interviewed back in the day. And that's when they do the audit. And $8,600 is missing. Now, fast forward into 1999, when I'm interviewing LeBron in Kansas at the local police department. He's, giving me details about his previous duty stations and leading up to, and then, he's telling me about different ports they'd been in and all that even on this last deployment. And then I go, now we're getting really close to Subic Bay, January the 17th, when the ship pulls in the port. They pull up pier side, and all of a sudden, his memory is blank. I mean, all of a sudden, hey, well, do you remember being with him? No, I don't remember being with him. Everything was so vague during that critical time. And so when you talk about, knowing, I mean, setting them up, and particularly cold cases, my memory's fading. I'm no longer a young man anymore, but when his mind was, and his memory was as sharp as it was, and now I'm interviewing him, and now we're talking about the night that they're in that dispersing office. He doesn't remember any of that, and didn't remember going to the ship the next day. And I mean, he was just blank. And so that was a major red flag. And so when we finished up, and so I'm like, okay, I need to get this guy to agree to another polygraph. I know he'd passed it before, but I'd gotten a green light from Al before I went out there. If I can get him to take a polygraph, he'll allow me to be repolygraphed. So, I told him, hey, appreciate you being cooperative. It was a 5-hour interview. Hey, my bosses are expecting me, hey, just to move on so I can go on to somebody else. Would you be willing to take a polygraph? And he said, sure. I go, I know you passed it once already. I'm sure you're going to pass it again. And as soon as I got to that hotel room, I'm speed dialing now. Get your polygraph examiner out here now, please. Get
the best one you got.
Oh yeah. And daggone it, who? Oh, I'm drawing up on who he sent out there. I'm looking at him.
Wasn't Mike Vogel, was it?
No, it's a black guy.
Oh, I know you're talking about too. I can't remember now.
So anyway, he puts him on a plane, he flies out, and he meets with me. I brief him, and he polygraphs him the next day, and he flunked miserably every relevant question. And so now we're off to the races, and it's 3 days of interrogations after that. I was, why am I drawing a blank on him? Hours at a time, and tried to beat him at his own game. Tried to be nice guy, doing the read technique, and the family needs answer. Hey, he's got a brother who's dying of cancer, probably only has a couple months left. They were best friends. Let's get some closure. we couldn't get him. And you know, first couple times I interviewed him, lengthy interviews, you know, and we got him to the point where he would say, "Hey, I recognize that I'm involved with this. I just don't remember doing it. And it could have happened this way." He could have, one of the examples he gave is he could have walked in on me and I'm taking money out of the safe because I see he left the safe unlocked. That's one of the scenarios. And I come in and he says, "Hey, I'm going to put you on report." And, you know, we get into a fight and I kill him. I go, "Is that what happened?" He goes, "I don't know." You know, he was toying with me, but he gave several examples like that.
Yeah.
He goes, you know, I recognize I'm dealing with this now. You know, this is all, you know, my mind's spinning. He was just playing me for a fool. So I thought, let me do one more interview. I need to videotape this one, and then I need to bring it back to the squad and get, you know, great people to look at this. Because I kind of leave it where pretty much he says, "Hey, you know, keep on doing, you know, keep on doing your investigation. Maybe you'll figure this thing out." And you know, which was a kind of a challenge, like go keep on investigating, Pete, whatever. But you know, I'm going to continue to play with you. But anyway, we got him, you know, and what he would do is he would close his eyes. He goes, "Okay, I'm going back in time. I'm going back." He goes, "Okay, I see myself. This is what happened." And then he challenges me, and then we're in a fight, and then I go, "Okay, so that's actually what happened, right?" And he goes, "I don't know." But he would always close his eyes and he goes, "I'm going back." And so I needed that videotape that and all. And because you know, remember Doc Gellis, our forensic psychologist.
Oh, sure.
He was phenomenal. Yeah. And so, you know, we needed to do a bunch more work, and then we needed to take another run at him at LeBron. And
how is he not invoked for a lawyer by now? I mean,
because he thinks he's smarter than we are.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and he was smarter. I mean, he was foolish to throw that out there because we weren't going to let go now. I mean, I knew he was good for it. I mean, it's not speculating. I knew he was good for it. It's just how do we get him to cross over and trip up or do whatever? But he clearly, because he's smart, he was playing us. Denton Carter, that was the polygraphic.
Denton Carter, that's the guy. Yep.
Denton Carter.
May rest in peace.
Yeah. So we went now at my tour. I'm coming out of the cold case program real soon, and we've done a bunch of work in the following year, and we really weren't any closer to solving. We didn't get any more evidence anymore against Michael LeBrun. It was how can we fool him into confessing? How can we be smarter than him? And so one of the things was we decided I would not be a part of the interview because he was used to lying to me, you know. So we're going to take that away as you know, so I'm going to not be in there. We're going to have two sharp agents, two of the best. That was going to be Jim Grievous and Dave Early. Mm-hmm. And we're going to do it. And we had a great plan. We just had a great, we had Al Billington, who flew out there with us. We were going to use him. We had the sister fly out with us. We were going to use her. The plan was, and we took his life. We had the Cacapon yearbook, you know, the cruise book. So I had pictures blown up that were, you know, I mean, they were like 2 feet by 3 feet, you know, of Andy Munns, of Michael LeBrun, key people, and we plastered it at his current house, his current wife, I mean, and his father. And so when he walks into this interview room, it was because we knew it was going to be mind warfare. It was, and it worked because, you know, we videotaped it. He walked in, he goes, wow, he's looking at the walls. He goes, this is my life. You know, this gets into, you know, we need to get into his mind and get him to do the right thing, and that's confess.
Yeah.
So, and what we had decided was this an accident or was this premeditated? One or the other. And what Jim opened up with was, we've done a lot of work. You told Pete Hughes to go do his homework, essentially, and we've done it. And we've recently met with the prosecutor, which they say, hey, we've got enough to move out on this, but we want you to interview him one more time, which was not exactly the truth. We hadn't met with, we had not met with the prosecutor. And it was, getting this guy to recognize that to believe that we were that far from he being charged up. And the only reason why we're taking another shot at him to interview him was at the prosecutor's request. But yeah. Jim had let him know clearly that we're ready to move forward on this. I don't even want to do this interview with you, Michael LeBrun, because we got enough to move out to charge it with you as it stands now. But I wanted to honor the prosecutor's witness, wishes, and here we are. So, and the whole thing was it premeditated? Because if it's premeditated, there's no statute of limitation. So take your pick, Michael. Did you do it on purpose? Or if it was something less than premeditated, if it was accidental, if you all get in a fight and he falls and he hits his head and he dies, that's not premeditation. You're clear. That's 5-year statute of limitations. As of 1973, you could not be charged. And that's the angle they came in with.
Right. Okay.
And you could see the mind racing, his mind racing. Man, if I can admit to something other than premeditation, then shit, these guys will go away forever, because I can't be prosecuted. He says, so if I, what did he say? If I'm telling you that if I take responsibility for his death and it was an accident, and you're telling me I'm not going to be prosecuted, and it was something along that, and this was key because this was battled in discovery, and went all the way up to the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals, en banc, all that stuff. And Dave Early goes, if it's the truth, and that's what saves us. If you're telling the truth, then you can't be charged. If it was an accident and you're telling us the truth, you can't be charged. Well, then he goes, yeah, I'm responsible for it. And so tell us what happened. And it's just like in the scenarios he had told me the previous year. What he says was, he and I were working in the spaces in the dispersant office. He told me he had to leave. He was done for the night, and he left. And he goes, he's a young officer. I've been on the ship for several years. He doesn't know how to be a dispersant officer. I'm running this office. And he goes, I look over and I see he hadn't turned the dial on the combination. So I'm thinking, you know what? I can take some of that money out of that thing, and he's gonna be held responsible for it. And so I reach in there and I'm taking, it's a little bit later. I'm reaching in there, I'm taking money out. Next thing you know, he comes in the door. Walks in the door. He goes, "What are you doing?" And you're stealing, and I'm going to put you on report. And LeBrun makes a big decision at that point. He tells us, he says, I said, "No, you're not," which means there's only one way he's not going to be able to tell, to put him on report. I'm going to kill him. He's going to be dead. That's why he's not going to. Oh, no, you're not. He goes, "We got in a struggle. I threw him down to the ground, and then I choked him to death." And wow. So. And then, okay, what'd you do with the body then? Well, I waited several hours. I checked the hallways and all that. And I waited, and I knew, let me dump his body in one of the oil tanks.
Wow.
And he goes, so, I waited. And then I took his body, I grabbed it up, I dragged it through some of the spaces and took it out on the deck, unscrewed the top to the oil tank, and then dropped his body into the oil tank. And that was black oil. And he goes, and then that was it. So that's what I did. So we got a great, and then this was videotaped, of course. And then we asked him to go ahead and, hey, we want you to demonstrate for us how you did this. Dave Early was going to pose as Andy Munns, Ensign Andy Munns. So Dave Early, the special agent. So he on video, he's going, hey, I'm pretending I'm reaching in the safe, and I'm putting stuff and money in my shirt, and the next thing the door opens up, I look over and it's actually Dave Early, and I'm putting you on a report. Oh no, you're not. And so he takes Dave Early and lays him down to the ground, the agent, and then he straddles him and he's up on top of him, you know, choking him. And Dave says, "Man, I was worried because he was really living. He was choking the shit out of me."
Wow.
Yeah,
Jeez.
yeah, and
Jeez.
and he goes until he went limp, and he goes, and then he was dead. So that was key. So now he's reenacting it for us on video. And so what we had also done, we brought the sister in case he didn't confess, and maybe we can get him to confess to her. We also brought Al Billington, who was a GS-15 at the time. He was the SAC of the Washington field office in 19.
Right.
And now it's September 2000, and he's the SAC, special agent in charge. And we brought him out there, and he's posing as the Andy Munz's brother who has cancer, and he had a brother who really did have cancer and was dying. And so after he confessed, we took Mary Lou Taylor in there, the sister, and he confessed to her as well. He says, "Hey, I want to apologize. Killing your brother. Can I get a hug?" And she goes, "No, you can't have a hug." and then Al Billington went in there as Mary Lou's cancer dying brother, and so he confessed again to those people to having murdered Andy.
Did Al forgive him?
Al forgave him. Yeah,
That's awesome.
Al forgave. May Al rest in peace too.
Yeah, right. He's a great man. Great man.
Yeah. So the good thing about that
was an amazing case.
The great story about that is Mary Lou's brother, who was dying of cancer, he died about 3 months later. And he knew now that, he wanted to know what happened to Andy. And I'd met him a couple of times, the brother. So anyway, that was, he went to his grave knowing that Michael LeBrun took responsibility for murdering
the family finally got their flag.
Yeah. Well, yeah, now as an agent, Lee, as you know, okay, I get this great confession. Boy, this is great. We're high-fiving. Yeah. Okay, great. Okay. So as you know, all right, you got a confession, now you got to corroborate it. So all right. So we don't have a body still. And
the ship's gone.
The ship is gone. And we have a great confession. Mm-hmm. But okay, where's the body? Why wasn't the body ever found? And so I figured, because knucklehead me, dumber than a bag of rocks, is thinking, okay, you drop a body in the oil, it's caustic, it's going to cause that body to eat up that body. It's going to be, that's going to explain it. So I go to the Navy's oil expert in DC, and I'm telling him the story, and he looks at the type of oil that was in the oil tanks, and he goes, "Pete, I hate to tell you this." He goes, "You drop that body in that oil, that body is going to be perfectly preserved, so that nothing's going to happen to that body. There's no air in oil, and so that body is going to be preserved. So if that body was in there today and you pull it out of that oil, it's going to look like it was just put in there 15 minutes ago, as opposed to 50 years ago." Wow. So that was a whack against us. It's like crap. So I met with the various engineers who owned from the Cacapon, who owned the oil tanks. Mm-hmm. There was one was there most of the time, the last several years, and there was one before that. But they had feared that maybe they were told, "Hey, when you're cleaning out those oil tanks, whenever you're cleaning them out, check this just to make sure that young officer wasn't thrown." You're talking years later. Because there were eight oil tanks, and so each one over the years is being cleaned out, totally cleaned out, emptied out, and to be looking for bones. Well, I found this this warrant officer, CW04, Chief Warrant Officer 04, had a steel trap of a memory, and I talked with him several times over the phone, and then I'm going, "Hey, well, did you ever see any bones, anything?" He goes, "No." And I was on the lookout for him. He goes, "No." He goes, "But Pete, I got to tell you this. You got to understand that you got that all that oil in there, but at the bottom underneath the oil is 18 inches to 2 feet of water." I go, "What?" Because it's water gets in the tank somehow, various ways. Sometimes we ballast the ship, so we pump water in. but there's water's heavier than oil. It's going to go down to the bottom. So there's always 18 inches to 20 to 24 inches of water in there. He goes, and I can tell you this, we've cleaned out the oil, and then we open up the vat on the top of the tank, and you get sun going down there, and you just got this brackish water, and all, you got some clear spots, and you can see all these microorganisms swimming around in there. And I go, what? And he goes, yeah. He goes, I don't know what they are, but there's some living in there and swimming in there and all that stuff. So I end up getting up with the microorganisms expert of the Navy, who had just recently written a paper about organisms living in oil, in that area where the oil and water meet.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, oh yeah, he goes, that those microorganisms, they're going to chew on clothing. I mean, they're just microorganisms, but it's skin, whatever. But if there's a body down there and there's anything on that body, yeah, they're gonna feed off of it.
Wow.
At the same time, the warrant officer was telling me that back in the day, they would, the EPA didn't exist, the Environmental Protection Agency didn't exist, so they pumped out crap out in the middle of the Pacific. He goes, we'd have these big oil valves down there at the bottom of the tank. So we'd want to pump out the crap water when it was time to. And he goes, there's no filter on these things. So, and they're like 9 inches wide. I forget total, but I had the dimensions down, 9 inches wide. He goes, Pete, all I can tell you is there's a lot of pressure. When we fire up those pumps and we're pumping water out of the bottom of that tank, he goes, it is a lot of pressure. If you put a 3/4 inch a piece of plywood on that valve and you turn the pump up, within a minute, it's gonna cut a perfect circle right through it. There's so much pressure through that piece of plywood, implying that, hey, if there are bones banging up against there, that they're going to break the bones up and it's being sucked out to sea. So there it is. That's exactly what we needed. There's the explanation what happened to the body. It sank down to the bottom because the body was eventually going to go down where the water is, because body is heavier than oil. It's going to go down there where the water is. You got the microorganisms. I got the experts explaining this for the oil as well as the water, and then I got the chief forensic pathologist for the military at the time, Dr. Rodriguez, I think it was.
Okay.
Brilliant guy. I mean, he'd done some of the toughest autopsies and all. So we sent the confession, the microorganism expert statement, the oil expert, and he ended up coming with a cause of and manner of death, saying the guy's dead, And so we're in good shape now. And when they got that, when that information was pushed over to defense on discovery, because they were fighting it, and they were going to go with false confession, because they had probably the top false confession expert as one of their witnesses as we're preparing for trial.
Yeah, of course.
So when we're preparing for trial, we're ready to trial. We fly in for the trial, and at the last minute they decide to plead guilty. Now he ended up pleading guilty to manslaughter, and the sentencing guidelines had to go back to what was in effect in 1968. So the sentencing for manslaughter in 1968 was 1 to 10 years. Wow. So the judge hated this case, hated Jim and I, and sentenced him to 4 years. So after all
Why
that,
did he hate you guys? What was that? What was
well,
that?
there's a couple things. There was one, what I didn't share was the confession was thrown out. Okay, initially, the confession was thrown out on 2 grounds. One, that we did not Mirandize him. We didn't give him his rights. And 2, that it was an involuntary confession because we were too heavy-handed in the interrogation room. Although he confessed within 35 minutes, we had this thing nailed tight. But I think they hung their hat on. The judge didn't like it. I think when Jim said, "Hey, this is your life," you you're going to lose all this. You're going to lose this pretty lady. You're going to lose this house. You're going to lose all this thing. And we're going to throw the full force of the United States government after you.
Oh boy.
I think they felt that was so he would have confessed to murdering his mother, who was still alive at the time.
Yeah.
So, we had done a non-custodial interrogation of him. We'd spoken to him in the parking lot. We had picked him up at his place of business. We said, we want to chat with you one more time. We got to the police department in the parking lot. We said, you're not under arrest. You can be free to go home. All those things that we do in non-custodials. And he later even confessed that that's exactly what we did. But what ended up happening was they were hanging their hat on that he was in custody. He felt that he was in custody because, like, I escorted him to the bathroom. Well, I escorted him to the bathroom because he's in a police department. You just don't let people roam the inner side of the police department. No, he needs to use the bathroom and all. And so they threw it out. The trial judge threw it out on those two reasons, failing to advise him of his rights, and then involuntary confession. And then it went to we had a good U.S. attorney. He was a division chief for the U.S. Attorney's Office down there. A true gentleman, great guy. Stayed in contact with him for many years, but lost contact recently. But he was a gentleman, and the defense attorney was a brawler, and so he was up there emotional, saying, "I can't believe this is 2000. These techniques are used," and lying to him about evidence and all that stuff. So it was, they filed appeals. So it went to the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals, and two judges ruled against us and one in our favor, which that was bad news because the confession is still thrown out. But the U.S. attorney came back to us and said, "Listen, we think we're going to win this thing. We're going to go en banc. En banc, if you know, is all 11 justices are here. We'll hear it. But you only get like a handful of cases that the entire Court of Appeals will hear. So what ended up happening, Lee, was like there were 75 cases that were pushed before the Court of Appeals, the entire Court of Appeals to hear, of which they accepted 5. And our case was 1. And the U.S. attorney felt like we had a decent shot at this because the defense was using a new ruling to throw this out that was just bad for the entire Eighth Circuit. And it was part of a burglary, and it was a confession during after a burglary. And they said, "Man, this is terrible for us. We have got to get this thing overturned," because they were losing cases in that area based on this new case law on this ruling. So next thing you know, it goes, they accept our case. All 11 justices are going to hear it. We fly in. And for the first time, when the trial judge hated this case, he would eat up our U.S. attorney. He would eat us up on the stand. But now you had 11 justices, and 2 of them got up there and said, "Hey, I watched that videotape, and I didn't see anything." He goes, he wanted to use the bathroom. They let him use the bathroom. He says, "Hey, can I use I want to call my wife because they want to do a search." And they said, "Yeah," because he goes, "Can I call my wife? Because you're going to take me over to the house. You can do a search. I don't want a surprise her. I wanted to know that you guys are coming out there with me." And so the judge goes, "I saw that. If he had said, 'Hey, I want to call my attorney,' I got a sense the agents would have said, 'Okay, here's the phone. Call your attorney.' Or, if he said, 'Hey, I want to leave,' I have a sense that the agents would have said, 'Okay, we already told you to leave.'" And so anyway, it was overturned. So the confession, it was 8-3 in our favor, and so the confession's back in.
That's awesome.
Yeah, they ended up appealing that to the U.S. Supreme Court, and they wouldn't hear. So that's when the confession's back in. They felt strongly that he would end up pleading to something because they said that the confession videotape was just too powerful. No jury would not not convict him. So
Oh,
Anyway,
it's
and
amazing. It's
then
amazing what happens when it leaves the investigative portion goes over to to the lawyers and they start kicking it around and wow, that's amazing that it actually got to that far and almost went to the Supreme Court.
yeah, and it kind of the sad thing is, they sentenced to 4 years. We were very disappointed. And I'm on a plane the next day with Jim, and we're flying back, and I got the local Kansas City newspaper, and it's headlines, the guy, convicted, and then I'm reading the local section, and there were two guys that were serving, just got sentenced to 2 years for killing a cat.
Oh my gosh.
2 years for killing a
Wow.
cat, and LeBron gets 4 years for killing a Navy officer on his ship in support of the
Mm,
Vietnam effort. The kind of remember I told you that the family wanted a flag,
yeah.
and that was one of the things. Well, we've got I'm drawing a blank on her name, but it's remember Admiral Porterfield was the
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, sure.
was the naval intelligence. He was the head of naval intelligence. So
Uh-huh.
he was so as what the family decided was they wanted to have a funeral at Arlington. So it was an empty caisson because the body's never been found. And
Mhm.
so we're going to have a big, going to have an event at Arlington National. Admiral Porterfield was the one who came out there and gave the family the flag.
Mhm.
And Director Brandt, Greg Scoville, I mean, a lot of the heavy hitters were very familiar with this. Well, a lot of NCIS folks showed up for that funeral, for the procession, and
That's
it
good.
was very touching to see Admiral Porterfield give Mary Lou Taylor that flag, kind of seal the deal. It turns out that Porterfield's daughter is now an
Yeah, she sure
NCIS
is.
agent,
Yeah,
and
she sure is.
she's done quite well. And a little story behind that, the
Mhm.
irony behind that is that, and she's a GS-15, done quite well.
Yep.
She was an intern for at NCIS
Uh-huh.
up in the CRIM program, and I'm the deputy IG at the time. This is 2005, and Jim
Yep.
is in Bahrain. So
Uh-huh.
Jim is no help to me, and I'm preparing for trial. And I got
Uh-huh.
this case file that's like 2.5 feet tall, and I need help in getting it organized and all this thing, whatever. And I'm, got a full-time job as a deputy IG, and I called, Code 23, the investigations directorate, and say, I need an intern. So here comes Miss Porterfield
Mhm.
doing her internship. She was a student at James Madison University. So she comes out there and helps organize it. This is 2005, and when she comes down and I realize Porterfield and I make the connection, I go, your dad gave, the family the flag in 2001, at the Arlington, in Arlington. And can't remember if she already knew that or whatever, but it was the irony of, Admiral Porterfield issues the provides the flag, and here, years later, I'm having his daughter help prepare this thing for trial. The case file, organize it as such.
Yeah.
And then the irony on top of all that is the the family came back to me a couple years ago. Mary Lou Taylor, the sister,
Mhm.
did the effort on the investigative side, and we were to help out. Well, the younger brother, he was 12 at the time that Andy was murdered, came to me a couple years ago and said, "Hey, we're trying to get Andy's name on the wall, Vietnam Wall."
Mhm.
And I've tried myself, and I've got my teeth kicked in. They're saying he doesn't qualify. Can you help me? And I go, I'm thinking, oh yeah, this is a ground ball. I mean, who wouldn't? If the story is
Yeah.
told correctly, who wouldn't put this guy on the wall? But I
Yeah.
started looking at the justification for their saying no. I mean, it's big DOD who says no, but that's based on Navy's, they're going to go with whatever, Navy leadership says, head of
Mhm.
manpower or whatever is going to say yes or no. And so it was no. And I'm looking at all the paperwork and I'm going, man, this is way over my head. I need a good attorney to come up with a justification for why he needs to be on the wall, because he was killed outside the combat zone.
Sure.
Combat zone, was, the Subic Bay was a staging area for the war, but it was
Yep.
outside the combat zone. So, um, guess who I call upon? Lieutenant Commander Chris Reismeyer.
Who you've worked with in the past.
Yes, and he retired
All
as
about
an
connections,
admiral,
baby.
and I've stayed in close contact with him. And I said, Chris, can you help me out? And he was familiar with the case.
Yeah.
And he goes, yeah, forward me the paperwork. And buddy, let me tell you what, I mean, he put a masterful piece of justification together. Where we had a number of people who've been put on the wall over the years, where there were waivers or whatever. Reagan demanded it when 55 Marines were killed in a plane crash over China when coming back from an R&R. They were coming back to Vietnam, and the plane crashed, and 55 died. So all 55 were put on. And he had other isolated people who were placed on the wall that fell outside of the DoD directive, for who part it was. So he's put a masterful thing together. That I reached out to Director Brandt. He was a director at the time when we solved the case and all, and he attended the funeral. Got a memo from him signed. Got a memo from Admiral Porterfield signed. It says absolutely he needs to do this. I got Director Omar behind it. Director Lopez behind it. But it kind of waned for a little bit between General Counsel's office and NCIS, and then it ended up going back to manpower, and some 05 basically said, some bureaucrat, and so we're taking another shot at it, buddy. We're not, we got a new administration in there now, and I just had a conversation with Greg Scoble a couple of nights ago. Brandt's behind it. We're going to have a meeting with the new deputy director, Greg Scoble Jr., and we're going to figure out how to skin this cat. We're going to get this guy's name on the wall.
That's great, man. That is good stuff, man. That's good to hear, because I can imagine going over to the black hole in the Pentagon and like going, okay, it's going to be there for years.
Oh yeah,
like and that warehouse where the Ark of the Covenant is.
Yeah, it had a lot of energy because the right people were behind it, and then we let bureaucracy take over. And
that's too bad.
When Brandt learned where it was going, he going, "This is not good, Pete. This is going to go slow. This is going to die a slow death." And he was right. And the amazing thing about Brandt, he had told me, he goes, "This is such a ground ball. This could have been done easily."
It seems like it, right? It seems like this is such an easy. It's like this should be a phone call to a guy that says, "Okay, yeah, that qualifies. Just give me some guys to go to, etch it."
Right. Yeah. So we're trying to figure out. We're going to put a strategy in place. We got Chris Reismeyer, wife who retired as a JAG. She worked for Hung Chow. Hung Chow is the new Undersecretary of the Navy. And so I've got a couple other things. Scoble's played golf with Hung Chow. Speaking to Scoble the other night, we're going to skin this cat. We're going to figure out this thing, because Navy needs to get behind it. Navy needs to get behind it, and we're done again. But it's really easy. As Reismeyer puts in the memo, it's a beautiful memo. I'll email it to you, Lee, because it's a piece of beauty. But it's basically saying Vietnam War's been over for 50 years. It's not like, okay, you give an exception. This is a directive. This is a policy. You can do a waiver to policy and do the right thing, because we abandoned him for 30 years and had him listed as a deserter for 30 years when actually he was killed. He was murdered trying to protect Navy assets, $100,000 cash is what he was protecting. And so let's do the right thing.
Well, absolutely. Whatever I can do from this podcast side of it, I'm happy to do it. We had success recently with one of our former special agents, Amanda Kopke, who got exposed to parasites in Africa, and it was on her deployment, and she's had all kinds of problems with Department of Labor, and so we kind of referred back to our Vietnam veteran agents who got exposed to Agent Orange, and she worked was the NIS agent, case agent on the guy that was the American sniper, Chris Kyle.
Okay.
So she worked with Texas Rangers on that case. And so when one of the SEAL team members that was on Chris Kyle's team is now a congressman. And he saw the podcast and is now writing legislation to get all civilian employees of the Department of Defense who are deployed overseas to make sure that they get the health care that they need when they're exposed to something like,
That's great.
burn
Yeah.
pits or agent, one of these, even the parasites that she got in Africa that's just decimated her body. But when you have success like that, and it's the podcast that helped get it there, we're just hoping right now that the legislation will come through in some form through Congress that will be good for all future special agents of NCIS, OSI, Army CID.
That's a great initiative.
So hopefully, we'll get that taken care of. And so whatever I can do to promote this for, LeBron, not LeBron, but Munns.
Andy Munns, yeah.
I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, I'll let you know. I'll keep you posted for sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, listen, we're going to talk about Cold Case a lot when we get Jim on here too, and that'll be a fun conversation.
Oh yeah.
But so in and out your career with NIST, as far as what do you think to kind of explain to people the difference between being a manager to a senior manager? What is it like to go from being somebody that's hands-on cases and all of a sudden now you're assistant director at NIST? What
it was kind of funny because
thoughts and process for that?
Yeah, well, I mean, you get in a position and you got to start accepting more responsibility. And I had always said I was 11 years on with the agency before, and I was a police officer for 4 years for that, so I wasn't a young guy when I stepped into management. I had always said that because I love working cases. I always said that I'll go into management when I start bitching about management. And that's what ended up happening. In other words, be part of the solution, not part of the problem, because now you're being a cancer because you're bad mouthing or whatever. You don't like well, then do something about it, Yeah. So that's when I decided to go the management route. And I also realized, because of mature agent, been around, and Lee, you saw great agents. You work with great agents. You work with mediocre agents. You work with agents who hung out in the shadows, but they knew how to leverage and manipulate bosses who were not paying attention. They were not engaged. They really didn't know what was going on underneath their roof, and so that they were getting good evaluations. They were getting nice, bonuses or whatever. And we all know who they are. And you throw your hands up and you go on, it's the management team, and or it's the supervisor, the detached supervisor. So when I decided to step up in management, and it was like, how can you deliver news that the agents don't want to hear? You're making a policy decision or whatever. And my big thing was case review. I just remember, as an agent, I worked for great supervisors and horrible supervisors, and the great ones knew what my cases were about, and they knew, and then they would highlight the good work you were doing and passing up the food chain. They were, but there were supervisors I worked for. I do great work, and because they weren't engaged, they weren't pushing it up, and so I was learning from great supervisors, and I was learning from terrible supervisors.
Sure.
How to supervise.
Some of the best lessons you get are from the terrible supervisors.
Absolutely.
Because you say that I would never do this or that.
And one of the big things was, was hoodwinking a supervisor. And the only way you're not going to be hoodwinked as a supervisor if you know the caseload the agent is working and the amount of work they're putting into it, and hold them accountable. That as a hard worker like yourself and Kathy and others, like I was saying, we knew who were the shadow draggers. I mean, they weren't producing anything, and they were held in fairly good standing, and it just would drive you crazy.
And many times those shadow draggers were the people in the office who were really the most negative people you ever meet. And they're not happy that you're being successful, so they're trying to do everything they can to tear you down.
That too. Yeah, that too. Absolutely. And all I thought was, okay, case review. Case review is everything. I remember I didn't have a problem doing case review. I was always late with paper, man. I was the worst paper guy. I loved investigating it. I get pulled together and whatever. And it was like, I got to write about this thing. Are you kidding me? Whatever. But I was terrible about that. But I had no problem sitting in the case review because I knew my stuff was good. My stuff was thorough. And, I go through case review with a terrible supervisor. He's going, hey, let's do case review. And the case review would last 10 minutes. He had no idea what I was doing. And the level of work was going into some of these cases. Clueless. And I thought it is about case review. And the more agents I talked to, they were more like me. The hard chargers felt the exact same way I did. And I thought, as a supervisor now, I got to, it's the hard workers are going to count on me to hold the shadow dwellers hold them accountable. So how am I going to do that? It's going to be the case review. Everything's case review, and case review in an upbeat manner. So, I had a so everything was about case review because when I did case review with agents, because they wanted to tell me about the good stuff they were doing, and I was excited to hear about the good stuff they were doing. And I went, "What made you think to do that?" Wow, I would have never thought to do that. So they get pumped. I'm pumped. They're pumped, and they're wanting, and they're wanting to, as opposed to, sometimes you get people in there and they go, the agent would go, I go, "Well, have you thought about doing this?" And they go, "No." He goes, "That's not going to turn up anything. No sense in doing that interview. Or doing that search." I go, "Huh?" I go, "How will you know unless you do it?" It's kind of like, don't, I'm paying you to investigate. So, turn over that rock, do that search, do that interview. You're not going to know, whatever. And so when I did the cold case program. And so, I learned a lot in that, trust me, because I dealt with a lot of agents who, maybe wanted to do an interrogation way too early or whatever the case may be. And we walk them through it, why maybe it's not time or whatever. And I remember the one big thing was I put mandatory report writing in. We had no report writing, didn't have to do an ROI, except when you as the agent, because we're so mature and we're the best agents that have been assigned to this program, that we only need to do a report when we needed one.
Yeah.
We felt it was necessary, like maybe it's going to go to trial or going to go to grand jury. And then as a program manager, I go in there and I had no idea what was going on in these cases because we didn't have any reports. so I was the bad guy. I go, "We're going to do 90-day report writing, mandatory. Sorry, guys, but I have no idea what's going on in these cases unless I'm able to read a report, or whatever."
Sure.
So anyway, but it got to when I went to Quantico. I did I did the tour of Quantico as the boss, and then out to Okinawa as the boss. And really, it was selling the supervisors on, on case review. It was everything. And to get the buy-in, like when at Okinawa, I was a true believer in case review. I mean, the Quantico agents, when I was there, I went there and it was an office in bad shape. The morale was
Pete, I got to tell you, I had to do time at Quantico. That was like being in prison because not the supervisors, but the agents that were working there. It was toxic. And I remember I called up Ron Olive, who was the ASAC at the time in the Washington field office. I just transferred in the year before from San Diego. And I called him up. I said, "Listen, can I get on that drug squad up in the field office? Because I got to get out of this place." And he said, "Come on up tomorrow." And I was out of there, man. I was like, I felt free. But for whatever reason, Quantico always had that reputation of having this. It was like the rebel office. They wanted to buck against everything the field office wanted to do.
It did. And I was warned when I left the cold case program, went down there, I was warned about a couple of people. And I thought, okay, I'm going to skin this cat. And I did. I mean, I knew who they were. And, one was professional admin staff. That was part of the big problem. And I pulled that person in because I was not an admin guy. I told you, I don't believe in policy much.
Sure.
What do you mean, late paper? What? When's that due? Whatever. So anyway, and I needed now. I'm heading up the Quantico office. I need help from the admin point.
Yeah.
And I was warned about the Edmund point, and I pulled that Edmund point, and I said, I need you. I need you to keep me out of trouble, because I will get myself in trouble administratively because I don't pay attention to this stuff. So I need your help. And buddy, we had a phenomenal relationship. It
Yeah.
was, and it was, who I knew who the poison was, and I pulled him in and said, I need you. And
Mhm.
next thing you know, we had that. I remember Ralph Blinko and Al Billington. Um, Ralph Blinko was the SAC. A couple other people, they came down there and did a visit. And I still remember this to this day. I'd been there about 9 or 10 months.
Mhm.
And he knew what the reputation was. And, they'd interviewed everybody and looked at case files, and, cases were up to snuff. I mean, thorough, good, good cases that were being worked. But more important, he said, I've never seen anything like this. You turn this place over, overnight, you turn this thing over. But it's because the agents want to do the right thing. I mean,
Yeah.
everybody wants to do the right thing. Give them the opportunity. And it's kind of like if you're a baseball coach,
Yeah.
and I've coached for years, I wasn't, I didn't know the finer techniques, but I knew enough, and I knew, who are you going to work with? You're not going to work with the shortstop, who's probably your best player on the team. You're going to work with
Right.
the right fielder, because he's the worst player on the team. He's the one you need to pick up. You need to, because that fly ball may go out there, and he needs to know what to do with it, and you work with him, and next thing you know, he sees it, he feels valued, and next thing you know, he's catching balls that he never would have caught before. Same thing, with working cases and supervising and leading.
Well, I think the one thing that was key there for you at Quantico, I mean, just from an observation standpoint, was the fact that you used a lot of the things that you had done in interrogation technique. I need you to be part of my, I need you on my team,
Right.
and you brought these guys in who probably may have been toxic because of how supervisors handled them in the past. And you said, I need you to be a part of the team. I mean,
Right.
you actually brought them in and used a
Right.
different technique.
There was one guy who that I was told he was the worst agent in the world. He couldn't track a bleeding polar bear in the snow. Um,
I think I know that guy.
and and I had a death case, and I was like, everybody, I forget it was, but I signed it to him, and I go, you can do this, man. You can do this. And he did a damn good job. I mean, it was good. It was, yeah, he'd been on like 15 years,
Yeah.
so people just cast him off. He's no good, he's useless, or whatever. Well, you know what? Sorry, part of the team. You're gonna pull your weight. If you got a tough case, I'm right there with you. I'll get my hands dirty with you. But yeah, it's really simple to me. I enjoyed it. Working with, you know, figuring out how to leverage and pull people over on your side, because
Yeah.
at
Did
the
you?
end of the day, they feel valued where they didn't feel valued. They're miserable when they're making everybody else miserable. But if you can figure out how to pull them over on your side, they're all of a sudden they're feeling good, and they're engaged, and you know what? They got a whole different attitude.
So, what was your experience when you went to San Diego as a SAC there? And you're in charge of one of the two largest offices in the agency.
Yeah, I went out there at a tough time, because the SAC there was leaving, and he had fallen out with senior leadership, and it was pretty bad. Um, uh, I loved it. You know, we were probably in the bottom third as far as you know measurements and all that stuff, stats and all that stuff. IR, productivity, all those things. We were probably
Yeah. Sure.
definitely in the lower third, and it was the first year pay banding. And it was the first year, if you remember, the pay banding was an experiment. So we're just going to
Yeah. Sure.
go through the motions and all. And I had some reservations about it.
Mhm.
But leadership said, let's give it an honest effort. Well, I was behind it. And plus, I wanted to pay the people who were the superstars. I wanted to pay them bigger bonuses than they'd ever seen before. And the people the shadow dwellers, I drove me crazy when everybody would get a bonus. Remember,
Yeah.
sometimes you had supervisors like that, SACs
Yep.
or you know, um, people at the leadership positions at headquarters. It drove me crazy when everybody would get it. In other words, you're taken away from the hard person who's here every day, putting in umpteen hours a day. The first person you call upon, and then this person's slipping out the back door. They barely, I'm sure they're cheating on their time card too, whatever the case might be.
Yeah, sure.
And in other words, they're not pulling their weight. You're going to give them a bonus. So you're giving a bonus for mediocrity, or even less than mediocrity. You're giving them a bonus. Please, it drive me crazy. So pay banding was the best thing, and and it really, I had Chuck Wormuth on my team. Chuck was a stand-up guy. He was one of the ASACs. Mary Jones was great. I mean, everybody was, I walked them through and I go, we got to get behind this pay banding thing. This is it. I mean, who your hard workers are. We want to reward them. And then we're going to pull up the others because it's a zero-sum game. So if they want any bonus at all, they're going to have to pull their weight. And then there was, one or two people that were pretty good, but they would barely, they wouldn't put in their leap or whatever, and they felt like, hey, I'm good. I don't need to do. I do more in 8 hours than people do in 12 hours. Whatever. Heard those, and I'm going, well, guess what? You know what? They're the mere fact that they're getting paid for 10 hours a day and they're only working 8. That's their bonus for the year, okay? Because they're not getting any. Unless they can tell me they solved every crime within the AOR area of responsibility, that they don't need to put in 10 hours. No, their bonus is the fact that they're getting paid 10 hours. No, it was interesting, the whole pay banding, and it was funny because I had one agent who was had been around for probably 20 years and probably hadn't done an IIR in 3 or 4 years, 5 years, and he was a CI agent. And
really,
yeah,
wow,
yeah. And it's funny because I just gotten out there and he got punished for something, so I had to hand him the punishment letter, whatever. I forget what it was about, and I knew him. Okay, I mean, I knew his reputation, which was don't expect much and all that stuff, and he was in a key position now, and when I handed him the letter, I said, hey, Smuckatelli, that's what we're going to use his name, is Smuckatelli.
Okay, sure.
Hey, Smuckatelli, I go, look, you're in a key position. Yeah, your IIR output is not very good, and we're doing this pay banding thing this year, so you're going to need to produce. You're not getting anything, zero. And so I go, but you know what? I have a sense, because you're a pretty smart guy. I got a sense though that I think I know why you're not putting out IIRs. He goes, what do you think, Pete? What do you what are you going to do? And I go, because it's been so long since you've done one that you're coming across good information and you're going, boy, this is good information, because the person had placement and access to some key places. Yeah. I go, you're getting something. You're going, I really should do an IIR on that. But you go, well, I'll do it tomorrow. And then after tomorrow goes by, you go, I'll do it the next day. And now it's getting old and you're going, I'm not going to do it, whatever. And then something else pops up. You go, I really should do it. And the reason why you haven't done it is because it's been so long since you've done one, you've forgotten how. And you're embarrassed to try and put one together because it's going to get ripped up or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
And he looks at me and he goes, you're exactly right. It's exactly why I haven't done one, because I get good information and I'm just, I've forgotten how to do it. I go, no more. I'm going to put a good agent who's a good IIR writer up with you, give you a little bit of training, you're off to the races. That person by mid-year had significant IIRs.
Wow, that's great.
Significant IIRs. I'm going, wow, this stuff really works sometimes, I guess,
That's good times, man.
You just got to know your people, and you got to figure out what works for one is not going to work for the other. And so, and there's always that personal touch when you ask about their family and stuff like that. How's the wife? How's the kid? How's the star pitcher doing? Those kind of things. They like a Dave Brandt, a Dave Brandt. Yeah. I mean, he remembers wives' names, kids' names. I mean,
Oh, he does. He really
he's
does.
incredible. And I've talked to so many people who say the same thing. He goes, I met Dave Brandt 5 years ago and he remembered my name and whatever. And it's
I don't
just
know how he does
incredible.
that. It's like, it just blow my mind. I
Yeah.
travel around with
Yeah.
him, and he knew people from 10 years ago he'd seen one time.
Right.
I,
No, and
I
that's
see somebody, I shake their hand, I forget their name right away.
I forgot your name, Lee. Just kidding. But no, I get it. But it's as a leader, you steal from the ones you admired, and then like you mentioned earlier, some of the bad ones you're learning all the time,
Yeah.
So I did the rack position out of Okinawa. I did the rack position out of Quantico, then went to Okinawa for a year and really loved it out there. The family loved it. Then I got promoted out of there into a position that I really didn't want to go to. It was this deputy IG. working for Lou Byer.
Oh, I can only imagine what that was like.
Well, let me tell you, it's funny because I'm not a big policy guy. When people learned that I was going to the deputy IG, there was people going, "Oh, I know I'm safe. I can't do anything wrong. Whatever. I know that. I know that ghost. I know that skeleton in your closet." I got there and Lou was great. Yeah. I'd heard bad things about Lou. I'd heard he's black and white, and he gets dug in on something, and you can't get him. And I tell you what, I found I had a great working relationship with him. He listened to me. If I could, I'd say, Lou, I'm not sure we want to go this route. I'm not sure if we want to issue this letter of caution or whatever they were. I go, I don't, here's why I don't think so. If he was open to it. I mean, if you could articulate a position, he was in.
Yeah. That was my experience with Lou as well. I mean, he's that kind of guy. He's like, he'll listen to you. He may have a opinion on something that he's very steadfast on, but he will listen to you, and you can change his mind.
Right.
First time I ever met Lou, I was like going, oh my gosh, I was up in 22, I think. And I was like, well, man, I am not going to like this guy. But Lou and I became great friends. He's just a black and white guy,
Yeah. And, let me share this story with you because I got to tell you this because I learned a lot from Lou. And the biggest thing I ever learned was mid-year reviews. Unbelievable. I've been through, I don't know how many years I've been on when I became the deputy chief, 20 years, something like that. I don't know. And I'd had 20 years of nothing but, mid-year, you're doing great, Pete, stay with it. No improvement areas mid-year, never had an improvement area in a eval. And I knew what I needed to improve on. I needed to improve on getting paper in on time. But, they always gave me a pass, and that was somewhat fair to a degree. That, I needed to tighten up paper, even with Dave Brandt, as great as he was. You remember back in the day as a young agent, as a 7 and 9 and 11, I worked for Dave Brandt. Remember when you did a report and you go, gosh, that was a complicated report. Now, I did a report. Now I got a new investigation I need to write up. I forgot how I did that. Let me go into the case. Let me go into the in the file cabinet. Let me pull that old case out
and find a report that looks like what you need.
The go by, the old go by, right?
Yeah.
And so I remember going in there 2 different times to get go bys because I knew I go written up, and because it was exactly what I needed. But I looked at it and there was a sticky on the outside of each one, and it was Dave Brandt's handwritten notes. And on the note, it was to the back when we had regions before we had field offices. Do you remember we had the old regions before the field offices?
Yeah, I was in the 11th region.
So Don Webb was the regional director for Charleston and Jacksonville and all that. Well,
Right.
when I was at Mayport, I went into two different files to get go bys, and there's a little stickum on the outside of the file, and it's a note to Don Webb. Hey, Don, I recognize this paper is late. However, he's, S.A. Hughes is putting drugs in the drug locker. He's been, swamped with it. But in other words, giving me an excuse for late paper. Twice he did that, but he never talked with me about it. He never said, "Hey, Pete, you need to, I get it. You don't like, doing paper, but man, we got to do a little bit better than this." He needed to tell me that, as much as I admired and whatever, he needed to pull me off to the side and say, "You can do better." So fast forwarding 20 years later, I'm with Lou Byer, and we're doing mid-year. Now I'm the deputy IG. He is the IG, the inspector general. I'm the deputy IG. I've never had a mid-year, comment or improvement area on evals, which I probably should have. And he goes, "Pete," he goes, "let's go to mid-year." So we're going. He goes, "This is where you're doing great, 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 great here, but I think you can do a little bit better in these two areas, or maybe it was one area, I can't remember." And it had to do with reporting or whatever. Right back to the my nemesis, getting something in on time or whatever. And I looked at Lou and I go, "Lou, oh, I'm going to take care of this. I'm going to take care of this. I gotta tip my hat off to you because you're the first guy who's ever called me out on this, and I will take care of this, and you will not be putting this in my year-end evaluation." And he laughed, and he didn't, because I fixed it, right? So I took that. That was a valuable lesson. Here I'm telling you this, and I've been retired since 2011.
Yeah.
How valuable that was, because I took that, because out of that job I went upstairs. I was the deputy assistant director for counterintelligence. But I want to tell you a little bit, about the San Diego thing and working with the ASACs and the SSAs. I told them, I remember meeting with them, and I'm going to share with you my philosophy. Everybody can improve. Everybody can improve, unless you're perfect. And I expect Mark Kluge, who was my SDS, he was PAC. I expect him to put an improvement area in my evaluation. I will ask that he do, because I know I can improve. But I'm going to tell you this. Every one of you, ASACs, are going to have an improvement area. And I expect you to put an improvement area for your SSAs. Now, this is not, historically, we've looked at this as the kiss of death. It is not going to be the kiss of death for this field office. I promise you, because I'm going to get buy-in from the senior leadership at headquarters, as well as, as long as PAC, SES, Kluge, PAC. And I spoke with Kluge too about it. I go, "Mark, I believe in improvement areas." I go, "So people are going to get improvement areas, but I want to be able, if I think somebody's ready to be 14 or somebody's ready to be 15, even with an improvement area, that better not be the kiss of death. If I say that they're ready, they are absolutely ready, then that's my stamp." I go, "We can all improve." And that because I put an improvement area, it should not be. And and so he goes, "I'm with you, Pete. We need more like that." And I go, "It should not be, because you can have an improvement area, but if I, as the SAC, say they are more than ready, then they're more than ready." And I think out of 4 SSAs that were eligible for 14, I think, I threw all my weight behind 2 of them. All of them had improvement areas, and both of them got promoted, even with improvement areas. I thought that's just what needed. It needed. I needed to be told, "Pete, get your shit in on time." Okay.
Yeah.
And then I will. I've always known that's my weak spot.
Well, I felt the same way, because when I got into senior management, I never forget, I won't name managers, but this manager comes to me and says, "Here's your improvement areas. It's the last one you'll ever get." And I just kind of, what? I more than anything now that I'm at the 15 level, I want somebody to tell me if I'm not doing things right, because you want to continue to improve. And he was right. I got to that level, and my manager above me at that time, I would not write evaluations. And when I finally retired, I go, hey, can I get an evaluation for a job that I'm applying for? And he's like, yeah, sure. But he never gave it to me. It's like
Oh, yeah,
I had
yeah.
to tell the employers, hey, I can't get him to, provide any information. It was just, it was sad, but you shouldn't do that to your people.
That is very sad. Yeah, that's the thing that killed me too. And I sat on several promotion boards. Okay,
Mhm.
and what drives me crazy, and I'm thinking one SAC, he had 4 SSAs that were going for 14, and this person came in and said, this SSA is my number one SSA is a must. It's a must promote. And then this one has to be promoted. And this one is no way he shouldn't be promoted. And I mean, all of them. And we're all laughing on the hiring board. I've raised this thing up. I go, you know what? This guy needs to stake out a position, have a set and say which ones that you'll die on the hill for. That's what we want. Which
Yeah.
ones? Don't say they're all, because that person was afraid. Oh no, they're going to be mad at me if I don't say that they're. It's just like and if somebody wasn't ready, and I told one SSA, "You're not ready.
Yeah.
You're not ready, and
Yeah.
you are sharp. You can move a mountain, but you've got some. You got a reputation, and you've recently blown up on an issue, and you need to get your act together. You can do it. I mean, you can move a mountain, but let me tell you what, this nonsense has to stop. And I don't want to, whatever. And I mean, I had another SSA come up to me when I was a second saying, I don't know what you've done, but that person has changed overnight.
Wow.
it,
That's great.
it's really just holding people accountable, and they're all do it. Like I could change. I'll get my paper in on time. Hey Pete, get the shit in on time. Lou says, okay, I got it.
Yeah,
It's
sure.
on time. And then I remember was like, when I was a SAC, and then we were doing the deployments early on with the deployments in support of um, going into Iraq.
Mhm.
I don't think the new thing hadn't been set up at FLETC, whatever it was for
The
the training.
CRFO.
Yeah, it wasn't there yet,
Mhm.
whatever it was. And I remember people, or either that or people wanted to do that, or even worse was they were on for 18 months or 2 years and they wanted to go overseas. And I would go, nope, 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 denied, but I would say denied, but I'd pull the agent in here and I go, here's what the deal is. How many search warrants have you done? How many times have you testified in court as a crim agent?
Yeah.
Whatever. None, one, none. I go, because let me tell you, if you do 2 years and then you go overseas, you're going to be there 3 years. And you're going to do a lot of force protection. You may not
Mhm.
touch a criminal case. And now you got 5 or 6 years on, whatever the case may be. And now you see your peers are, putting in for, management positions, SSAs, and you've never done some of this stuff.
Yeah.
And you've got to drive the boat. You are going to be exposed. Your agents will know whether or not you've done this kind of thing because you're doing case review or whatever. So let's just sit back and do another year here underneath your belt, then launch over there, that kind of thing. But wasn't afraid to say no. You just need to
Mhm.
explain to them. And I remember it came back to me from the SSA going, boy, the agent said that, boy, denied my request to go, to transfer and walked me through it, and I got to agree with them. you know, um, you know, yeah, it's about being ready. And I remember I had an ASAP, great, great person, still in close contact with that person, and had bounced around a lot,
Mhm.
and now was done 2 years maybe as the ASAC, and hadn't worked much crim before, had done the overseas force these goofy jobs, but now is
Yeah, sure.
the crim ASAC, and I go, and you go, well, what do you think I should do? I go, stay another year for sure. Don't be thinking about the next assignment. You want to own this. You want to
Yeah.
drive this program. You want to be able to do this thing, with your eyes closed. That when an issue comes up, you're snapping your fingers. Here are options. You're mentoring your SSA, saying, okay, which one? What are the options, SSA? You're mentoring that person. But it seems like you're in these positions, you're checking off enough, some blocks, but you need to own this. And and that person told me a few years ago, said, wow, you were the best boss I ever worked for because you walked me through what I needed to do. I
Yeah.
mean, but it's just common sense. I don't want to pat myself on the back because I knew if I could improve the ASAC game, then the SSAs and the agents are better for it. It's a cascading effect. So
Sure. Well, I mean, you won't find anybody that says Pete Hughes was a bad manager. I mean, I can tell you right now, you always people talk that guy. You don't want to work for him.
yeah,
But if you said to me or anybody else that I know of, they'd say, "Hey, I got to go to work for Pete Hughes." I'm saying, "Well, good man. I know where I stand with him, so that's a good deal."
yeah, yeah. I mean, the thing is, I mean, you can be nice about it and all. I mean, it's just I mean, the death review board. Remember that? I mean, people were afraid. I get kicked back. I'd be the first one. If the case got through the DRB, I'd be reaching out to the ASAC. Hey, great work by your agent and your SSA.
Yeah.
Phenomenal, thorough, whatever. And the reason why I'd be doing that because there's going to be a time when the sitting doesn't done something well, and so
Yeah.
I got skin in the game. I put investments. I've made deposits. That's what I call them. Hey,
Yeah.
I have a relationship with this ASAC. I've patted them on the back for these great cases, thorough investigations. So guess what? He's got one and that needs work. And so
Yeah.
I don't have any problem reaching out and saying, hey, you have done some great work on, we need to redo or we need to do some things on this case to get it through, to get it closed out of the death
Good
review
stuff.
board.
Well, Pete, we've been going for 3 hours now, so I just want to say you're now with MITRE, and so what are you doing with MITRE these days?
I am, I
Lead
work from home.
investigator, right?
Yeah, I'm an investigator for MITRE Corporation. We are a federally funded nonprofit um, um, research and technology company. We've got about 10,000 employees.
Mm-hmm.
We got two big hubs, one up in outside of Boston and then in McLean, Virginia. And then we've got some decent sized offices scattered elsewhere around the country. I'm reunited with Jim Grievous, my old,
That's awesome.
running mate with NCIS. Actually, he got the position first, and then they had an opening and they brought me in. I'm telling you, it's funny. I well, let me back up a bit. After I retired from NCIS in 2011, I went to Afghanistan for 5 years, and I investigated fraud and corruption out there with all the money we were pumping out there.
Yeah.
And so, and I did the management for a while, and then and I was dealing with nothing but annuitants and all that stuff, and U.S. attorneys, and I felt like I was losing some control as a man. I just wanted to work. I wanted to go back to my roots because I saw how easy it was. And so I ended up working cases. I asked the SAC, let me step down, let me be an agent. I promise you that I'll put so much meat on the table to be your best decision you've made in a couple of years. And it was, so I went back and I was working at, a street agent, just loved it, had fun. And then I got out of there, and then with MITRE, I have no desire to get in management, zero. Just let me work cases. And it's, these aren't high end cases at all. Every once in a while, and I'm part of the insider threat program. So, we're looking at network logs and stuff like that, making sure that people aren't, walking out the door with MITRE or government information that they shouldn't have, and that. And then, occasionally we'll make a referral to the FBI because it looks like this person is sharing information with the bad guys on the other side of the pond, that kind of thing. But I work from home. So I got a 15-second commute. I live on Lake Anna, outside of Fredericksburg. I got a good management team. Work with my partner, Grievous, and it's fun.
That's awesome, man. That sounds like a great job.
It is.
That's awesome. And well, I forgot that you'd worked for the CIGAR in Afghanistan doing the reconstruction fraud work. I mean, how was that as far as when you're working those? I mean, it sounded to me that from listening to the other podcasts that it was there was a lot of work to it. You were getting people right and left because there's just a lot of corruption going on there.
Yeah, it was tough, and what it's funny. When I got out there, it gets back to leadership again. When I got out there, um, we had a terrible reputation. Our guys were out smoking cigars at 3 in the afternoon, and we're fighting a war out there. And
Yeah.
it was working its way back to me real quick that we didn't have a good reputation. And then we had one or two superstars that how we talk about it. And then you got others that are, and they were cancers. And
Wow.
I had to figure out, okay, how do we not renew their contract? These were 1-year contracts. So we ended up getting rid of the driftwood, and then we brought in a handful of NCIS people, and we were off to the races and doing good stuff, and we were a well-oiled machine. And I was jealous because I'd be doing case review, and I'd want to work these cases. I would go, look, I'm in the twilight. I'm in the fourth quarter of my career. Not quite the 2-minute drill yet, but
got to catch bad guys.
Yeah, I just want to catch bad guys. And did, man. I'm telling you, we did some sting operations that were fun. Fuel was like gold.
Is
Fuel.
that right?
Oh yeah. The Afghans were stealing left and right. We had contracts with Afghan trucking companies where they would move fuel to all the forward operating bases and all that. And yet they were being run by the operations officer, were usually an expat, because they need the American. But these were Afghan companies, and they were creative. I mean, it was in their DNA to steal. I mean, you got a 20,000.
You got to appreciate a good thief,
right? You got a 20,000 tank there, and then they would build tanks inside that tank, and then they would fill the tank you couldn't see, and then empty the major tank, not knowing that there's 500 gallons hidden in this other tank. Oh my gosh, it was done all the time and stuff. And when I stepped out of management, I went from the embassy, that drove me crazy because you had State Department people having all these martini parties and stuff like that. You didn't know there was a war out there, and that we were losing soldiers and Marines and stuff like that. It drove me crazy. And that was part of the reason when I told my boss, let me step out of management, let me become an agent, and I want to go to Bagram. So I left a nice, hot showered container. It was and then I went to a shed. Living in a shed with no running water, and I had to go to 50 yards, walk down there to use the urinal, whatever. But I wanted to be where the war fighters were, and feel like I was really contributing. And Blaine Thomas, I worked out there with Blaine.
Oh, he's a legend. What a legend.
Yeah, we were 2 years out there together, man, and we were in close contact ever since. I mean, he was great. And so the fuel was crazy. I'll show you. I mean, they were stealing left and right from us all the time, and it was young sailors who would, or young soldiers who would get caught up in it. You'd have these truck drivers drive up to the fuel depot and say, "Hey, I'm going to empty my tank, but why don't you leave 500 gallons in it and write off on the paperwork that I delivered everything, and here's a couple $100 or whatever the case may be." They would, we had good soldiers that were going down,
Yeah.
And it drove me crazy. And so I'll share this story with you. I went to a forward operating base on a case, a good case, in which we got the company owner charged with manslaughter because he built these grates that you put over the culverts, so you can't place IEDs in them because the Taliban were putting IEDs in these culverts. So putting these, it was called the culvert denial system. So it's just nothing but rebar overlapping each other, and then you slap it on, you affix it to the culvert, and they can't put the IEDs in there. And then we ended up making a case against this company because he committed major fraud, and we lost a couple of soldiers because of that. And we got him, and because I had a great relationship with the Afghan Attorney General's office, which we didn't have any relationship with him. And then when I was a manager, we had three of them assigned to us. I met with the deputy attorney general, and that was because of my NIST experience, overseas and traveling, and carrier 2 years and going afloat, going ashore, and whatever. But we had three prosecutors assigned to our entire cigar outfit, and so that worked out great. But anyway, and that guy ended up being charged with the manslaughter. But I was going to this Florida operating base on one of those cases, and what I would do is I go to the fuel depot and just check with the soldier there to say, hey, anybody trying to shake you down, trying to get you to leave fuel here and pay you money, and this soldier looks at me, he goes, yeah, it just happened just a little while ago. He goes, don't look, but see that guy over there in the white outfit? And I go, yeah. And he goes, he just asked me, he goes, hey, you leave some fuel in my tank, I give you $500. And I go, what'd you tell him? He go, hell no, I'm not doing that. I go, okay, here's what we're going to do. You want to have some fun? He looks at me kind of cross-eyed. What do you mean? I go, we'll have some fun. I go, so here's what you're going to do. If you're willing to, we're going to have some fun. I'm going to walk away. And then what you need to tell him is that when you walk over to him after I'm out of sight totally, and you tell him, hey, listen, Muhammad, we'll go with Muhammad. Okay, that's
okay,
safe.
sure.
It probably was Muhammad.
Abdul.
And you go, or Abdul. Okay, Muhammad Abdul. Okay, and I go, what you're going to do is you go up to him and tell him, hey, did you see that civilian over there, a little while ago talking to me? And you're going to tell him that I am the head of all fuel out of Bagram, and I'm the big boss. Okay, so you tell him that, but you tell him that's why you said no, but he's leaving. He's flying out of here in the next 30 minutes on a helo. He's going back to Bagram. So we can do this if you want to still do it. I mean, I'm willing to do it. And he does that. The guy goes, okay, I'll do it. Step, and he gets up with me a little way. We plan to meet, and he comes back. He goes, oh yeah, he said he'd do it, but he's going to come back tomorrow with a truck, and we're going to do it tomorrow. I go, okay, great. So that day, I was meeting with an Afghan prosecutor on that culvert case, where we had some soldiers, and I met with the chief prosecutor for the province. It's like counties, but they have 37 provinces. And anytime they had a chance to meet with cigar agent, they wanted, because they get kudos or whatever. We were like the FBI of Afghanistan. I mean, truly, they feared the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction, because we could, with a blink of an eye, we could say, you're no longer getting contracts, you're being blacklisted, that kind of thing. So anyway, meet with the prosecutor, and I go, hey, look, I know we're going to, we talked about the culvert case. I go, listen, I got a guy here who wants to pay my fuel guy $500 to leave, I forget how many, 1,000 gallons of fuel or whatever the case. I go, you got a prosecutor that you can assign to this thing, and you want to play? I mean, because he's an Afghan. He goes, sure. So he goes, I'll have prosecutor Ajmal there at the base at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. He'll work with you on this thing. So I ended up get up with the prosecutor the next morning, and we walk him through everything, and so here comes Muhammad Abdul pulls up his truck, and we got it all planned. Me and the prosecutor sitting in an ambulance on the runway, and the runway is close to the fuel depot, right? So we can see everything real clear, because nobody's going to think of an ambulance. And so we witnessed, and we had the fuel guy give a signal when the money was passed after he's leaving the fuel in the truck. So he's dropping fuel. He's going to leave 500 gallons in there. There's going to be a money exchange. And so what I told him is, I go, once you get that money and you give the signal, which was take your hat off and put it back on, that means it's been done. And then walk over here, and I don't want to touch that money. You give that money to the prosecutor, because I didn't want to chain of custody. I didn't want to touch nothing, So anyway, he does it just like that. He walks over, gives prosecutor Ajmal the $500, and so And then, as the guy's leaving the gate, we snag him in his truck, and we seize the truck, and we drain the rest of the fuel out, because now we know how much fuel was in there. And then I'm interrogating him. And I'd asked the guy, the fuel guy, the Army soldier, I go, how is his English? He goes, his English is better than my English. And I go, okay, good. So when I'm interrogating the guy, and I go, hey, Muhammad Abdul, I go, you're in trouble, man. You just, you shook down my fuel guy, $500 for this $1,000 of fuel. No English, no English. Yeah, and yeah, I don't speak English.
Yeah,
and so,
great.
Trust me, if you knew what I said to him, and I said that to a U.S. citizen here, I think I'd go to jail. As I told him, oh, where you're going, buddy? I go, you're going to jail. You may not be in there very long, but it ain't going to be very fun where you're going. Anyway, it was fun. The fuel thing was, and you want to have impact at the end of the day, and we saw that. The contracts is when you look at the contracts, they were allowed to have 5%. We're paying for 100% fuel to be dropped. And there was wiggle room where they could get away with 5% without being charged or fined or anything. 5%. And I met with the contracting officers several times. I said, this has got to stop, because I'll be telling them how they're doing the fuel thefts. Here's how this one did. Here's how this fuel theft. I go, we have got to change the contracts on all these. And they finally bit off, and we went from 5% down to 2%. And it was funny because, that's saving millions and millions of dollars in fuel costs at the end of the day. Wow. But it was, that mission out there was fun. We were part of a task force, which is FBI and DCIS and OSI and Army Procurement Fraud Unit. And it was great. We always had great guys coming out there. And it was fun. Hated to be away from holidays and birthdays and stuff like that. But, the money was good. It was able to put, my kids through college because of it. So it was fascinating. But I can tell you this, I was out there 6 months, and I said, this whole mission out here overall, this effort is a waste of money. I could drive down I-95 and dump suitcases out of money and watch people scramble, pull off the road, grab that money, and they'll spend it better than the way this money is being spent in Afghanistan. Wow. We were building schools that didn't have teachers, that turned out to be, potted plants for, the Taliban would take. I was just what a waste. And I had a great IG. He was a ball buster. John Sopko. They hated him. State Department hated him. The admirals, the generals hated him. Why? Because he was tough. He was interviewed once, and he said, hey, listen, I'm not doing this job to make friends. If I want a friend, I give me a dog. They hated him. I had one admiral going, I can't stand it. Your IG's coming out here. I can't stand it. I go, look, Admiral, I got it. Sometimes he can be a little rough around the edges. I go, but he's spot on. There's a lot of fraud, waste, and abuse going on out here that needs to be, needs to stop, Yeah. But no, it was a lot of fun. It's a great mission, great assignment.
Well, you've done a lot of great things, Pete. You've done, amazing career, amazing, and you get to catch bad guys today. That's where it's all good. That's the best.
It's like lifting, and nobody has to do case review with me. It's pretty good.
Well, that's a good thing. I guess that's a good thing for sure.
Yeah.
Listen, Pete, it's been great talking to you. We've gone now for about 3. We can probably go for another couple hours, but
we didn't even touch on being the Deputy Assistant Director for Counterintelligence Investigations and Operations, which was a laugh. The whole building shook when it was announced I was going to be the
hey, what we used to say about the term FCI. Who makes the best FCI agents? Former criminal investigators.
Well, it's funny because did that, and I couldn't even spell counterintelligence without spell check.
Well, I always had, is it together or is it separate?
Is a hyphen in there or not?
Is there a hyphen in there or not? I that was always the debate.
I can tell you this though, just real quick. I was a little bit nervous. I mean, I was told that, hey, you know what, I came out of the IG shop and they said you need to get some CI experience, but boy, it was like getting hit over the head, you know.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to embarrass the agency, and I didn't want to embarrass myself, but they did right. They had Greg Bachman as my deputy. I think you know Greg.
Good man.
He was phenomenal deputy, and I had Kevin Glenn as my deputy.
Another smart guy.
Head up investigations. You know, and what Bachman had told me, as you mentioned, you know, I went through our operations, and you know what the type I'm talking about, right? And I remember went through everyone because I wanted to be. I'd stay late. I just didn't want to embarrass myself because I knew nothing about CI, and you know, and I went through all of them, and I got up with Greg one day, and I go, "Wow, we spend a lot of money and man hours and time for some of these operations, and I'm not seeing any return on investment."
Yep.
He looks at me and he goes, "Boy, you are a breath of fresh air." He goes,
yeah.
That's the beauty of somebody who's not been living this and saying, well, this is the way we do things. Bum, 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 bum.
Yeah.
He goes, you're exactly right. He goes, and so I used to call it the Bachman Initiative, you know, that we did for a couple of years. You know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
That a certain agency shut us down.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Bachman was brilliant. I learned so much from him and Kevin Glenn, and with the CI investigations, I'd be going, well, why are we doing this on this?
Yeah.
Well, it's a CI investigation. That's the way we do things. I go, that's changing.
Well, I got to share this story with you, Pete, because this is a Mark Fox story. Mark Fox is my SAC in Naples. I'm working counterintelligence, and I'm doing the deep stuff. And so he was brand new SAC, and we were briefing him on these developmentals, as you know what I'm talking about. And so he sits there and he's quiet, doesn't say anything, looking at this stuff. And so, we finished all this. Well, Mr. Fox, do you have any questions about these particular developmentals? And he goes, yeah, I got a great idea. And so he's not even cracking a smile. I got a great idea. So we're having problems developing our assets, right? But yeah, kind of. I got an idea. Let's go over to the child daycare center and let's develop them while they're still in the crib, because in my estimation, it will take 18 years before they're ready to be launched. And I'm sitting there looking like going, are you serious?
Yeah, that is so Mark. He had such dry sense of humor. Love Mark to death, and phenomenal agent, and
he is. He's the best.
Workhorse. But he had that dry sense of humor. I'd have so many people come up to me because we worked together in Mayport, and I'd have people years later coming up to me and go, you know Mark Fox? Yeah, didn't you work with him? I go, yeah. He goes, I don't know how to take him. I don't know if he's serious or not. He's got it's the dry sense of humor. You're okay.
Oh, he told us that. And I think Dave Compton and I walked away from that meeting because both of us were working as partners, and walked away from the meeting and go, it is hard getting these things going, but we sure could use some help from the Navy to get these things going, because as you know, there's always the document support that you need from the Navy to these things going.
Yeah.
And it was so frustrating. Of course, I was like going, I don't think Mr. Fox is going to like us too much, because it seems like we're not doing anything, and we're trying to do everything we can. And so we're going, well, boss, anything you can do to help us out with that CDC initiative, we'll be right on it.
Yeah.
You're the best. I loved Mark Fox. I loved working for him. And I will say this, Dave Compton, when he decided to reward one of his assets with a gift for helping us out on a deal we had in Naples, and he went And they went and bought him this big freaking sailboat at the exchange. It was beautiful. I mean, it was wood carved. And so he had to go get it approved by Mr. Fox, Mark, to sign off on it. And Mark goes, and it's just that dry sense of humor. He goes, it's like, Jesus Christ. We give people for doing, and this guy hadn't done that much, but we had inconvenienced him for 6 months. So we said, we got to do something for the guy. And he's like, I can't believe you guys are doing this thing. It's like he was not a believer in the Keller Intelligence program in Naples, Italy at that time. It was the funniest thing. It was the funniest thing. I got to tell you, I walked out there, I was like, well, yeah, he's right. We're giving them sailboats. I don't understand why. It was the funniest damn thing.
Too funny. Yeah.
Oh, good times. Well,
anyway.
Let's get this thing together with Jim Grievous, and let's all get together and talk some cold case.
Okay, we'll do. Yeah. We got some funny interrogations.
Oh, I bet.
We got some.
You guys are like Batman and Robin. And I'm not going to decide who's Robin, but
yeah,
you guys are making.
I know who Robin is. Okay. Yeah, I'll get up with Jimmy. I'll be in touch with you. We'll do it in the next couple of weeks, that kind of thing. So whatever your schedule counts for, but it'll be a lot of fun. It will be.
I'm wide open. I'm wide open. I'm open to you guys. I don't have Jim's number, so I'm gonna count on you to reach out to him, get him to participate.
Yeah, I certainly will. Well, Lee, great chat, and hey, I appreciate the honor. Real honor to be on the show, and a great effort on your part to get the word out, and and it's just good. It's good to see you, and tell Kathy I said, hey, tell her that I didn't have any problem downloading Zoom.
Well, I was giving you all the problems. I think when I was in reality, I think Kathy said something to me. You need to test him on some of this technology you're sending him.
And I don't blame her. That's based on experience. Yeah. Yeah, buddy.
Hey,
great seeing you. Be good.
Hey, thanks a lot, Pete. We'll talk to you soon.
You bet. Be good now. Bye-bye.
Bye.